Chapter 348. Zhang Ming composed himself and said with a smile, "What you said makes sense, but what does it matter? Maybe they don't want you to know about this." Lung Yelyo sighed. "I hope second senior sister won't tell anyone about us." Zhang Ming was stunned when he heard this. He smiled and asked, "What are you afraid of?" Lung Yelyo shook his head. "I was mainly worried that second senior marshal sister would tell the people of the Heaven's Craftsman faction about my mother. If the Heaven's Craftsman faction was on guard, it would be hard to deal with it then." Zhang Ming finally understood what Lung Yelyo was trying to say. "So you're worried that your second senior sister is a spy?" Lung Yelyo nodded. "Right now, Kikyaman is weak and the Taingalman are powerful. I'm afraid that second senior sister will want to leave Kikyaman and join the Taingalman." Zhang Ming asked doubtfully, "It doesn't look like it. When I saw your second senior sister and that in Jiahui, they didn't look like that kind of person." Lung Yelyo turned to look at Zhang Ming, blinked, and asked with a smile, "Prince Zhang, can you tell who's good and who's bad?" Zhang Ming was stunned and shook his head with a bitter smile. "I don't have that ability. It's hard to predict people's hearts. I can't tell who's good and who's bad just by looking at the surface." Lung Yelyo nodded and muttered to herself for a moment before saying in a low voice, "No, I have to tell my mother about this." Zhang Ming nodded. "You're right. If this matter is really as you say, tell your mother as soon as possible and let her be prepared." Sun Xiaoer was about to go to the production room when she saw her eldest disciple, Han Gyun, walk in. "Master, I have something to report." When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she nodded. "Go ahead." After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Han Gyun said slowly, "Master, does he remember what I told you yesterday?" Sun Xiaoer was stunned when she heard this. She asked in confusion, "What is it?" Han Gyun quickly replied, "It's about second junior sister." After being reminded by Han Gyun, Sun Xiaoer remembered what she had said yesterday and nodded. "What happened to Han Yu?" Han Gyun said, "Master, this disciple has investigated and found that second junior sister is indeed in contact with the Taingalman." Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer turned to look at Han Gyun and asked in a deep voice, "Really? Did you really find out?" Han Gyun hurriedly nodded. "Master, ever since the competition between us and the Taingalman, this disciple has discovered that second junior sister has been in contact with the Taingalman." After hearing Han Gyun's confirmation, Sun Xiaoer's eyes suddenly narrowed. She frowned and asked, "Why doesn't Hong Yu want to interact with the Taingalman? Is there a misunderstanding?" After hearing Sun Xiaoer's question, Han Gyun hesitated for a moment before saying softly, "This disciple is afraid that second junior sister and the Taingalman have something to do with each other." Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer asked coldly, "Are you saying that Hong Yu will side with the Taingalman?" Han Gyun nodded. "The Taingalman are powerful now, and our Kikyaman is weak. With this competition, our Kikyaman doesn't have much chance of winning. If we lose this time, we will belong to the Taingalman. We are weak to begin with, and it will be difficult for us to win this competition. If second junior sister tells the Taingalman about us, then we have even less chance of winning." Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer nodded. "Are you afraid that Hong Yu will tell the Taingalman about us?" Han Gyun nodded. "Exactly. If second junior sister tells the Heaven's Craftsman faction about us, we won't have any chance of winning." After hearing Han Gyun's answer, Sun Xiaoer turned her head and asked, "Do you think that we have a chance of winning this competition with the Taingalman?" After hearing Sun Xiaoer's question, Han Gyun's expression changed. After a moment, she said frankly, "Master, based on this disciple's experience, we have no chance of winning this time." Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer nodded. "Why don't we have a chance of winning?" Han Gyun replied, "The equipment we make is not mainly for defense, but the Taingalman's equipment is mainly for defense. If we compete in the flexibility of our armor, then we have a chance of winning. But if we compete in the defense of our armor, I think that it will be very difficult for us to win, unless a miracle happens." After hearing Han Gyun's words, Sun Xiaoer inwardly nodded. Although her eldest disciple's temper wasn't very good, whether it was in terms of crafting skills or experience, She was second only to her in the seven possibilities sect. Han Gyun, if you were in charge of this matter, what would you do? After hearing Sun Shower's words, Han Gyun's face suddenly showed a trace of embarrassment. After a moment of silence, she smiled bitterly and shook her head. Master, this disciple is slow-witted. I really can't think of any way to win. Hearing this, Sun Chao nodded and sighed. We have no choice but to compete with the Tiangongmen this time. If we want to compete in the defense of two types of equipment, it will be very disadvantageous for us. The only thing that gives us a slight advantage is the weight of the equipment. The weight of both sides is on the same level, so it will be of some help to us. Hearing this, Han Gyun shook her head. It's useless. If the overall weight is reduced, we may have a chance of winning. But the minimum weight they mentioned is also the minimum weight of their equipment. Speaking of this, Han Gyun's tone paused for a moment before she continued. Based on a weight set by both sides, as long as they use the lightest metal, they can completely forge equipment that is stronger than ours. In terms of defense, the defense of leather armor is definitely not better than the light metal equipment. Hearing this, Sun Xiao nodded and then asked, the natural silk is indestructible. Say, if we use the natural silk to make an equipment, is it possible to beat them? After hearing Sun Xiao's question, Han Gyun was silent for a moment before she shook her head. It's also very difficult to do this. Although the natural silk is incomparably tough, logically speaking, if the natural silk is woven into cloth, it can withstand the slashing of swords and sabers. Speaking of this, Han Gyun's tone paused for a moment before she continued. But in fact, although the natural silk is incomparably tough, this is its advantage, but at the same time, is also its disadvantage. The natural silk is tough. Even if it is woven into cloth, its toughness still exists. If you wear equipment made of the natural silk and use a saber to slash it, it should not be a big problem. But as long as it is a sharp weapon, its defense will immediately be broken and it will not be of any use. Therefore, if you want to use the natural silk to make equipment, the use is too simple and the cost is huge. There is no need to make it. Chapter 349. After listening to Han Gyun's answer, Sun Shower nodded. You're right. Sky silk is indeed incomparably tough, but equipment made of it isn't very useful. It can only withstand simple slashes. If you're strong enough, even if you can't break the equipment made of sky silk, you can still seriously injure someone. The amount of wild silk is too rare. If you want to use it to weave cloth, the amount of wild silk needed is very large, not to mention making equipment. Therefore, basically no one uses wild silk to make equipment. At this point, Sun Shower paused for a moment and was silent for a moment before continuing. Unless you have a huge amount of wild silk to make this equipment in more than 3 layers, it may be improved. However, if you do this, the thickness of the wild silk equipment will increase, and the flexibility will be reduced a lot this year. Even so, the damage of sharp weapons on wild silk equipment will only be reduced a little, but the damage is still not to be underestimated. After hearing Sun Shower's words, Han Gyun was silent for a moment before sighing and saying slowly, if we want to compete with metal equipment in terms of defense, we have to find a shell of the deep-sea divine turtle. Only then can we have a chance of winning. The shell of the deep-sea divine turtle is incomparably hard and extremely light. If it is made of equipment, it will definitely surpass the equipment made by the Tiangongmen in terms of defense. Hearing Han Gyun mention the deep-sea divine turtle, Sun Shower also sighed. Although the shell of the deep-sea divine turtle is incomparably hard, I've only heard of this kind of divine item. I've never seen it before. What a pity. While the two were talking, they suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. Lung Yelyo's voice was also heard. Mother, what are you feeling pity about? When Sun Shower heard the voice, she quickly looked up and saw Lung Yelyo and Zhang Meng walking in from outside the door. Lung Yelyo came in front of Sun Shower and asked with a smile, Mother, what are you feeling pity about? Sun Shower smiled and patted Lung Yelyo. Your ears are so sharp that you can hear it from so far away. Lung Yelyo turned his head to look at Han Gyun and asked with a grin, Eldest senior sister, what were you talking about just now? Mother kept saying that it was a pity. Hearing this, Han Guyun smiled and said, Master and I were talking about the deep sea turtle. If we had the turtle shell of the deep sea turtle, we would definitely win this competition with the Tyangomen. After hearing Han Guyun's words, Lung Yelyo immediately opened his eyes wide. He turned his head to look at Sun Shower and said with a smile, Mother, as long as we buy a deep-sea divine turtle shell, we won't have to waste Zhang Dazhai's lifespan. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Sun Shower smiled and shook her head. Little Lu, it's not as simple as you think. If the shell of the deep-sea divine turtle was so easy to obtain, then it wouldn't be a treasure. Han Guyun also smiled and said, That's right. After so many years, I've only heard that someone used the turtle shell of the deep-sea turtle to make equipment a long time ago, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. Sun Shower sighed. The reason why the deep-sea turtle is called the deep-sea turtle is because these turtles basically don't appear on the surface of the sea, so people naturally can't see them. Since they can't see them, then there's no need to think about getting their turtle shell. At this point, Sun Shower's tone paused for a moment before continuing. It seems that the turtle shells that we obtained in the past were also from these turtles. They weren't obtained by hunting. After listening to the two's words, Lung Yelyo nodded with some disappointment. Then he turned his head to look at Sun Shower and said with a smile, Mother, I saw a second senior sister and her brother today. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Sun Shower and Han Guyun immediately looked at him. Lung Yelyo whispered again, Mother, second senior sister's brother, seems to be from the Tyangomen. Tyangomen? After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Sun Shower suddenly turned her head. Really? Did you really see it clearly? Is he really from the Tyangomen? Hearing this, Lung Yelyo hurriedly nodded. I found the mark of the Tyangomen on his sleeve. After hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Han Guyun nodded, turned to look at Sun Shower, and said, It seems that I wasn't wrong. Second junior sister is indeed in contact with the Tyangomen. At this point, Han Guyun's tone paused for a moment before continuing. Master, do you think second junior sister will tell the Tyangomen about us? After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Shower pondered for a moment before shaking her head. I don't think so. There must be another reason. Hearing this, Han Guyun asked tentatively, Master, do you want me to call second junior sister over? We can ask her face to face. Sun Shower pondered for a moment before nodding. That's fine too. I happen to have something to talk to her about. Hearing this, Han Guyun hurriedly responded, turned around, and hurried out of the hall. After seeing Han Guyun leave, Lung Yelyo moved closer to Sun Shower and asked softly, Mother, why is second senior sister in contact with the Tyangomen? Sun Shower shook her head and said with a smile, Didn't you say that the Taoist is her younger brother? Do you think she needs a reason to meet her younger brother? Hearing this, Lung Yelyo asked with some doubt, But why haven't I heard of it before? Does it have to be when we're competing with the Tyangomen? Sun Shower shook her head. No, it can't be what you think. There must be some reason that we don't know. Speaking of this, Sun Shower paused for a moment before continuing. Although Han Yu has only been in the sect for 8 years, she's definitely not the kind of person you think she is. It's better not to make wild guesses. When she comes later, we'll ask her face to face. Not long after, Han Guyun and Han Yu walked in from outside the door, and Han Yu stepped forward and bowed. Master, is there anything you need from me? Sun Shower nodded and said frankly, I heard from little Lu that your younger brother is from the Tyangomen. Hearing Sun Shower's question, and Han Yu's expression suddenly changed, and she hurriedly replied, Yes, my younger brother is indeed from the Tyangomen. After hearing Han Yu's words, before Sun Shower could speak, Han Guyun had already asked first. Junior sister, you didn't tell your brother about our Kikyaman, did you? Hearing this, Han Yu hurriedly waved her hand and said, No, senior sister, I definitely didn't tell him about our Kikyaman. Han Guyun sneered. Since it's not about this matter, why do you and your brother have to meet at this time? Hearing Han Guyun's question, Han Yu suddenly turned around and knelt down in front of Sun Shower. Master, I haven't told anyone about our Kikyaman. Han Giyun asked coldly. Then tell me, why do you have to meet now? Chapter 350. After hearing Han Giyun's question, and Hong Yu hesitated for a moment before replying softly. I'm slow-witted. Ever since I joined the sect, I haven't made any contributions to the sect. In this competition with the Taingongmen, I couldn't contribute much either. This disciple, indeed, has a younger brother working for the Heaven's Craftsman faction. Therefore, this disciple wishes to inquire about the Heaven's Craftsman faction from him. I wish to know in advance what equipment the Heaven's Craftsman faction has created to compete with us. After hearing and Hong Yu's words, Han Giyun hurriedly asked, Did you find out anything? And Hong Yu shook her head. I don't know what kind of equipment they're making, but I heard from my brother that the Taingongmen have moved some deep-sea frosty iron from their warehouse. I guess they're going to use the deep-sea frosty iron to make equipment this time. After Sun Xiao heard and Hong Yu's words, she immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. After a while, she sighed. This time, I'm afraid we're in trouble. Han Giyun hurriedly asked, Master, what is the deep-sea frosty iron? Is it very powerful? Sun Xiao nodded. The deep-sea frosty iron is one of the top materials. Even among these good materials, it's one of the top. Speaking of this, Sun Xiao sighed. I didn't expect the Taingongmen to take out the deep-sea frosty iron to compete with us this time. It's really unexpected. The deep-sea frosty iron is extremely rare. Coupled with the fact that it's not easy to obtain, this material is even rarer. I think that even if the Taingongmen are rich, they won't have a lot of this material. I didn't expect the Taingongmen to invest so much. It seems that they're determined to beat us this time. After listening to Sun Xiao's explanation, Han Giyun's expression changed. She said in surprise, Then, won't we lose without a doubt? Sun Xiao nodded. That's true. The Taingongmen took out the deep-sea frosty iron to compete with us, but we don't have the upper-level material to make equipment. Comparing the two, we have no chance of winning. Hearing this, Han Giyun and Hong Yu were shocked and asked in unison, Master, what should we do? After hearing their questions, Sun Xiao subconsciously glanced at Zhang Ming. Only then did she feel a little more confident. She turned her head to look at Han Giyun and Hong Yu and said with a smile, You don't have to worry. I have my ways. After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Han Giyun's expression relaxed a little. She suddenly turned her head to look at Hong Yu and said somewhat apologetically, Second junior sister, I'm sorry, I'm not waiting for Han Giyun to finish her words, and Hong Yu spoke up, Senior apprentice sister, it's okay. I didn't tell you about this matter in advance. It's also my fault for making you worry. After hearing Hong Yu's words, Han Giyun, who had always been outspoken, felt a little better in her heart. But after thinking for a while, she hurriedly asked, Junior sister, if that's the case, wouldn't it be bad if the Taingongmen find out about your brother? After hearing Han Giyun's words, Hong Yu was silent for a while. Then she forced a smile and shook her head. It's okay. Shui did it very carefully. No one should find out. After hearing Hong Yu's words, Sun Xiao nodded. You'd better not contact your brother in the future. If the Taingongmen find out, it'll be very bad for him. Hearing this, Hong Yu nodded. Now that we know that they want to use the deep-sea cold iron to make equipment, we won't contact each other anymore. Unless there are new changes in the Taingongmen and they use new materials, Xiaoyi will contact me. Hearing Hong Yu's words, Sun Xiao stood up and helped Hong Yu up. It's been hard on you. You spent so much effort on the matter of Qiqiao sect. As your master, I feel very apologetic. Hearing this, Hong Yu hurriedly replied, Master, your disciple owes you a great deal. I have no way to repay you. It's only right that I do my part. Sun Xiao nodded. You have to be careful in the future. Also, pass a message to your brother for me. Tell him that I'm very grateful to him for everything he has done for Kikyaman. Han Giyun also sighed. I hope Xiaoyi won't be found out by the Heavenly Palace sect. Otherwise, after hearing Han Giyun's sigh, Hong Yu's face darkened. If the Taingongmen really found out about this matter, it would be really bad. After Dazhai and his sister parted ways, he went straight back to the Taingongmen. As soon as he opened the door to the courtyard, he saw a few people standing in the courtyard. After seeing them clearly, Jiahui's heart skipped a beat. The people in the courtyard were Han Yuchao, Shun Fei, and the others. Jiahui composed himself and hurriedly went up to Han Yuchao. Jiahui greets young Master Han. Looking at Jiahui walking over, Han Yuchao sneered. "Where did you go just now?" Hearing Han Yuchao's question, Jiahui's heart suddenly sank. He had a vague feeling that Han Yuchao had found out about his secret. Jiahui forced a smile. "Nothing. Today happened to be a holiday, so I went out for a walk." After hearing Jiahui's answer, Han Jiahui asked coldly, "Where did you go?" Jiahui hurriedly replied, "I just went out for a walk and then had some food." Hearing this, Han Yuchao asked again, "Where did you go to eat? Who did you have dinner with?" Before Jiahui could answer this time, Wang Hai, Han Yuchao's henchman, spoke first. "Did you have dinner with people from Kikyaman?" Hearing the three words, 7 apertures sect, Jiahui's forehead suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. "No, how could I know people from Kikyaman?" After hearing Jiahui's answer, Wang Hai snorted coldly and kicked Jiahui to the ground. "I asked you nicely, but you refused to answer. Did you have to wait for me to make a move on you before you answered?" Jiahui hurriedly got up from the ground and said to Han Yuchao, "Young Master Han, I don't know what you're talking about." After hearing Jiahui's words, Han Yuchao sneered and waved at the henchman beside him. "Grab him first. I like to see how long he can be so stubborn." Hearing this, the henchman immediately rushed up, Jiahui knew that something was wrong and hurriedly shouted at Han Yuchao, "Young Master Han, I really don't know her." Before Jiahui could finish his words, he was pressed to the ground by the henchman. Then, Jiahui's words turned into screams. After the henchman taught Jiahui a lesson, Wang Hai asked, "Kid, don't think that we don't know that the person you met was your sister, right? Today, we beat you up to let you know that our young master knows what you've done." Jiahui struggled to get up and said loudly, "I don't know that person. She's not my sister." Chapter 351. These few days, Zhang Meng had a leisurely and happy time. Every day, he would play in South County City with Lung Yelyo. Otherwise, he would go to the charming places outside South County City. Happy time always passed very quickly. Unknowingly, it was time for the competition between Kikyaman and the Tiangongmen. In order to let everyone know that they were fair and would not bully others, the Tiangongmen specially invited a luxurious lineup of judges to decide the outcome of this competition. The deputy sect master of the Tiangongmen, Han Qingyun, was the main judge. The sect master of Kikyaman, Sun Qiaoer, was also considered a judge. The third disciple of the sword-crafting sect, Yin Jianbai, also joined the ranks of the judges. The 8th disciple of the Medicine King Pavilion, Fan Yin, also participated in this grand occasion despite the long journey. The 5th disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect, Xia Tianhao, also came here to join the army of judges. For this competition, the large sects around South County City had all sent important figures to participate. Of course, there were also some small sects around South County City who came to participate in this victory. However, they were too famous, so they could only sit in the audience and watch. The reason why the Tiangongmen invited so many people to watch was naturally not just to defeat Kikyaman. They did not know that such a big scene would be needed for a small Kikyaman. The Tiangongmen's main purpose was to let everyone know that Tiangongmen could definitely do what they wanted to do. There were so many sects in the world. Naturally, the Tiangongmen and Kikyaman were not the only sects that specially made equipment. If they defeated Kikyaman with great fanfare this time, it would also be a reminder to the other small sects that made equipment. As long as they easily defeated Kikyaman this time, it would be much easier for the Tiangongmen to make a move on other sects in the future. Sitting in the middle of the judging platform and looking at the crowd below, the deputy sect master of the Tiangongmen, Han Qingyun, felt a sense of complacency. A mere Kikyaman was nothing in Han Qingyun's eyes. It would be a piece of cake for him to defeat them. What's more, the equipment for the competition this time was forged with deep-sea cold iron. Not only that, but there were even better materials in it, which made the equipment's defense even more terrifying. The reason why Han Qingyun was able to become the deputy chief of the Tiangongmen was because he was the junior of the Tiangongmen's leader, Zhu Jinshi. On the other hand, it was also because of his system and skills that he was able to stand out from the rest of his seniors and juniors and become the only deputy chief. The leader of the Tiangongmen, Zhu Jinshi, usually did not care about the affairs of the sect, so the power naturally fell into the hands of Han Qingyun. Therefore, on the surface, Zhu Jinshi was the leader of the Tiangongmen, but in reality, Han Qingyun had the most power. Looking at the people who came to participate in this competition, Sun Xiaoer was a little nervous. No matter what, Kikyaman was only a small sect with a few dozen people. She rarely saw such a big scene. In Sun Xiaoer's eyes, the third disciple, Yun Jianbai, was an existence that she could only look up to. The eighth disciple of the Medicine King Pavilion, Fan Yan, and the fifth disciple of the Heavenly Sword Sect, Niet Tianhao, shocked Sun Xiaoer even more. She had long heard of the strength of these three people, but she did not expect that they would come to participate in their competition today. There were also those people sitting in the audience. Sun Xiaoer took a closer look. She did not dare to underestimate any of them. This was because these people were all famous figures in the vicinity of South County City. They were either the sect masters or elders of the sections. In short, Sun Xiaoer had already understood that most of these people's statuses were higher than hers. Facing so many important people, Sun Xiaoer felt a little uneasy. Although she had already tested Zhang Meng's strength and proved that his skill was indeed useful, Sun Xiaoer was now a little suspicious. These people were all invited by the Tiangongmen. The Tiangongmen invited these big shots because they were confident that they could defeat Kikyaman. Their goal was naturally to let these people spread the strength of the Tiangongmen. The reason why the Tiangongmen dared to invite these big shots naturally proved that they were absolutely confident that they could defeat Kikyaman. Otherwise, wouldn't it be embarrassing for the Heaven's Craftsman faction in front of these bigwigs? Deep-sea cold iron was one of the best materials in the world. If this material was used to make equipment, the defense of the equipment could be imagined. If Zhang Meng had not appeared, Sun Xiaoer would have probably surrendered immediately. Even if they found the skin of the diamond monster, it was only trash in front of the deep-sea cold iron. Sun Xiaoer had once tested it. Even with the best diamond stone skin, it could only block a level 4 attack. It could not block a level 5 attack. Sun Xiaoer did not dare to imagine how strong the equipment made with deep-sea cold iron would be. The deep-sea cold iron was incomparably hard. Coupled with the special craftsmanship, the defense of the deep-sea cold iron was increased to the extreme. Facing such a terrifying deep-sea cold iron armor, to be honest, Sun Xiaoer did not have the slightest idea of defeating it. Although Sun Xiaoer had never seen equipment made with deep-sea cold iron, she guessed that based on the level she had tested, it would be able to block at least a level 8 attack, or even originally, Sun Xiaoer had some confidence in Zhang Meng. When she first arrived, she was both surprised and surprised. However, after seeing so many big shots, Sun Xiaoer's confidence suddenly decreased. Thinking of this, Sun Quainer's forehead involuntarily broke out in a cold sweat. During the test, they used a level 6 weapon. This meant that if Zhang Meng activated his skill, he could definitely block the attack of a level 6 weapon. However, if Prince Zhang used his full strength, what level weapon could he block? Who didn't know? Sun Xiaoer was a little anxious. She could not help but wipe off her cold sweat. However, this action of hers was clearly seen by Han Qingyun, who was standing at the side. Seeing Sun Xiaoer's anxious look, Han Qingyun sneered in his heart. A small Kikyaman actually wanted to fight with Tiangongmen. What a joke. If this competition was not for others to watch, a small Kikyaman could destroy it several times over in a matter of minutes. Seeing Sun Xiaoer continuously wipe off her sweat, Han Qingyun's eyes suddenly lit up. Previously, he only thought that Sun Xiaoer was the leader of Kikyaman. After taking a closer look, he realized that Sun Xiaoer was actually very beautiful. Although she was slightly older, it could not hide her beauty from the past. Looking at Sun Shower's fair cheeks, Han Qingyun suddenly remembered that his son had told him about Sun Shower's daughter. Thinking of this, Han Qingyun hurriedly looked elsewhere, trying to find traces of Sun Shower's daughter. Unfortunately, it was not time for the competition yet. The contestant from both sides had yet to enter the arena. Han Qingyun turned his head in disappointment. Looking at Sun Shower beside him, he sighed in his heart. Such a beautiful girl, what a pity. No, if she defeated Kikyaman. Chapter 352. Han Qingyun looked at Sun Shower and suddenly laughed. Sect leader Sun, it looks like you're very nervous. Hearing Han Qingyun's question, Sun Shower quickly turned her head and said, "It's a little hot. It's really a little hot here." After hearing Sun Shower's answer, Han Qingyun nodded and said with a smile, "Sect leader Sun, what are your plans after this competition?" Sun Shower was stunned and looked at Han Qingyun in confusion. "Sect leader Han, what do you mean?" Han Qingyun smiled. "Sect leader Sun should know what I'm trying to say." Sun Shower shook her head. "I don't know. Sect leader Han, if you have anything to say, just say it." Han Qingyun coughed lightly and said with a smile, "What I'm trying to say is that after the competition, Kikyaman will become Taingongman." After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Shower's expression changed, and she said calmly, "Sect leader Han, the competition hasn't started yet. It's too early for you to say this." Han Qingyun shook his head and waved his hand. "It's not early at all. I just want to tell Sect leader Sun this truth as soon as possible so that Sect leader Sun won't have any hopes of getting lucky." Sun Shower laughed coldly. "Then I'll have to thank Sect leader Han." Han Qingyun nodded with a smile and said slowly, "There's no need to thank me. I saw that Sect leader Sun was very worried, so I kindly reminded you." Sun Shower shook her head. "Sect leader Han, before the competition ends, no one knows the outcome. It's better not to say such things." After hearing Sun Shower's words, Han Qingyun waved his hand and leaned towards Sun Shower before speaking in a low voice. "Sect leader Sun, to tell you the truth, our equipment this time used the deep-sea cold iron as the raw material. Don't you know?" After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Shower was stunned. She turned to look at Han Qingyun and asked curiously, "What did you say? What material did you use to make the equipment?" "How would I know?" Han Qingyun shook his head. "Sect leader Sun, don't think that I don't know what you've done. I can tell you that I know everything." At this point, Han Qingyun sneered, "In Dazhai is the younger brother of your second disciple, and Hong Yu. I'm sure you've already heard about the materials we use to forge equipment from him." After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Shower was shocked. She hurriedly said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Why didn't I know about this? Who is in Dazhai? Don't accuse a good person. Hurry up and let him go." "Release him." Han Qingyun sneered. "In Dazhai, do you think it's so easy for me to leak out our sect's most important secret?" When Sun Shower heard this, she said anxiously, "Let him go quickly. We don't know him. He has nothing to do with this matter." Han Qingyun shook his head. "Sect leader Sun, why must you do this? Since Dazhai has done such a disgraceful thing, you should know that I will definitely not let him off." When Sun Shower heard this, she gritted her teeth. "Sect leader Han, what do you want? How can you let him go?" After hearing Sun Shower's words, Han Qingyun pondered for a moment, then said with a smile, "Sect leader Han, have you thought about it? When you join the Taingongmen, there will be no one to take care of you. Your life will be very difficult in the future, right?" After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Shower shook her head. "Sect leader Han, you don't have to worry about this. Moreover, the competition hasn't started yet. It's too early to say these things." At this point, Sun Shower paused for a moment, then continued. "If the Taingongmen lose this competition, then what you said just now will be extremely laughable." Han Qingyun waved his hand. "It's not laughable. It's not laughable at all. This is the truth." At this point, Han Qingyun paused for a moment. He pondered for a moment before continuing. "Sect leader Sun, we're all equipment makers. We're no strangers to equipment and materials. I can tell you that in order to ensure that this competition is foolproof, We've used some adamantine from the Magic Empire to increase the defense of the deep-sea frost iron by a lot. As for you, what are you going to use to make equipment? If I'm not wrong, your best material should be the diamond monster's skin. Sect Leader's son, do you think that you can defeat my deep-sea frost iron with just the diamond monster's skin? After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Xiaoer did not defend herself. As long as one was an equipment maker, they would know the importance of materials. The deep-sea frost body was already extremely hard. Ever since it was equipped, its defense was even more shocking. If the adamantine was added, its defense would be even more terrifying. Although adamantine could not increase the hardness of equipment, it could increase its toughness. Unknowingly, if the toughness of the equipment increased, its defense would naturally increase as well. As for the materials that Kikyaman used to make equipment, it was just as Han Qingyun had said. The best material that they could use was the diamond monster's skin. Unfortunately, even the best diamond monster's skin could not withstand a single blow from the deep-sea frost iron, not to mention the addition of adamantine. Seeing that Sun Xiaoer was silent, Han Qingyun pretended to sigh. "Xiaoer, why do you have to do this? Shut up." Before Han Qingyun could finish, he was interrupted by Sun Xiaoer, whose face was flushed red. "Sect Leader Han, please show some respect. Xiaoer's name is not for you to say." Hearing Sun Xiaoer's reprimand, Han Qingyun's face turned red. That was only the first step of his test. If he called Sun Xiaoer's name and she did not mind, he would proceed to the second step. Since Sun Xiaoer did not allow him to call her by her name, he could only find another way. Han Qingyun hurriedly waved his hand. "I'm sorry, Sect Leader Sunday. It was a slip of the tongue. Please forgive me." At this point, Han Qingyun pondered for a moment before she smiled and said, "It's mainly because this sect master was worried about sect master Sun's safety. That's why I spoke so bluntly and caused a slip of the tongue. Please forgive me, Sect Master Sunday." Seeing that Han Qingyun had apologized, Sun Xiaoer's anger lessened a little. She said seriously, "Sect Leader Han, you are the sect leader of the Tiangongmen. Please don't speak to me like that in the future." Han Qingyun nodded and said with a smile, "Sect Leader's son, to be honest, you are treating me like an outsider. In the future, we are all Tiangongmen. Why should we differentiate between each other?" Han Qingyun purposely emphasized the last sentence, hoping to attract Sun Xiaoer's attention. As expected, as soon as Han Qingyun finished speaking, Sun Xiaoer's face turned red again. She said angrily, "Sect Leader Han, why do you say that?" Hearing that, Han Qingyun shook his head. "Sect Leader's son, did I say anything wrong? Have you forgotten the rules of our competition? If Kikyaman fails, then she will belong to the Tiangongmen. When Kikyaman belongs to the Tiangongmen, won't we be one family? There will be no distinction between each other." Chapter 353. Sun Xiaoer was enraged. "Don't even think about it." After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Han Qingyun sneered, "Sect Leader's son, you were also present when we set the rules. Don't tell me you want to go back on your words so quickly." Han Qingyun paused for a moment before continuing, "Sect Leader's son, even if you want to go back on your word, do you think you can do it in front of so many people?" Sun Xiaoer was enraged, but she was also part of setting the rules. For a moment, she was so angry that she couldn't say anything. Seeing that Sun Xiaoer didn't answer, Han Qingyun continued, "All of you from the Seven Skills sect are women. If you become disciples of the Heaven's Craftsman faction in the future and no one takes care of you, I'm afraid." Although Han Qingyun didn't finish his sentence, Sun Xiaoer knew that what he said was the truth. 90% of the Tiangongmen were men. If the women of Kikyaman joined the Tiangongmen, they wouldn't have a good life if no one took care of them. If they really lost this competition, it was certain that Kikyaman wouldn't have a good life in the future. However, it was impossible for Sun Xiaoer to give in. Sun Xiaoer turned her head to look at Han Qingyun and said angrily, "Sect Leader Han, what do you want?" Sun Xiaoer's voice was a little loud, and it attracted the attention of the other judges. Seeing this, Han Qingyun quickly clasped his fists and said apologetically, "I'm really sorry. I was discussing something with Sect Leader Sun just now. My voice was a little loud." Don't blame me. Don't blame me. Sun Xiaoer didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so she turned her head angrily and ignored Han Qingyun. Looking at the angry Sun Xiaoer, the evil fire in Han Qingyun's heart grew even stronger. He swore in his heart that he would definitely. As time went by, everyone gradually arrived, and the competition officially began. Han Qingyun stood up and gave a speech to the crowd. He said a lot of useful and useless things. In short, he welcomed everyone and hoped that they would witness this moment. Other than that, he didn't say anything meaningful. After Han Qingyun finished speaking, he introduced the other judges to everyone. Then, he announced the start of the competition. The two contestants entered the competition venue from two different directions, which was the empty space between the judges' seats and the audience's seats. In this open space, there were two tables facing each other. Beside the tables, there was a row of weapon racks with a total of 10 sabers hanging on them. The Tiangongmen's player was Han Yuchao. Originally, it was impossible for Han Yuchao to participate in the competition. However, under Han Yuchao's snot and tears, Han Qingyun had no choice but to agree. Therefore, Han Yuchao represented the Tiangongmen in the competition. As the host, Han Yuchao was the first to appear. Han Yuchao was dressed very handsomely. He wore a snow-white robe and held a folding fan with gold in his hand. Coupled with his good looks, he could be considered an elegant young master. Behind him was a disciple of the Heaven's Craftsman sect, who was holding a golden rectangular box. The two of them arrived at their table one after the other. Han Yuchao instructed the disciple to place the box on the table before he cupped his fist and shouted to the audience. The Tiangongmen's equipment is ready for the competition. Next, it was Kikyaman's turn. The people representing Kikyaman were naturally Lung Yelyo and Zhang Meng. Lung Yelyo, who was dressed in pink, held a gray box in her hand. She walked side by side with Zhang Meng to their table and placed the box on it. Seeing Han Yuchao's expression, Lung Yelyo cupped her fist and shouted to the audience. Kikyaman is here to participate in the competition. The reason why Han Yuchao took the initiative to represent the Tiangongmen was because he had a motive. Han Yuchao and Lung Yelyo stood side by side in front of the audience. One of them was dressed in white, while the other was dressed in pink. The audience's eyes lit up. At this moment, someone suddenly shouted from the back of the audience. "Good job. Mr. Han and Ms. Lung are a match made in heaven. Mr. Han and Ms. Lung are a perfect match." Under the lead of some people, more and more people felt that the two of them were a perfect match. They couldn't help but agree loudly. Hearing the cheers from the audience, Lung Yelyo was so angry that her face turned red. She turned around and glared at Han Yuchao. "Did you do it?" Unfortunately, the voices below the stage were so loud that Lung Yelyo's voice was drowned out. Seeing this, Lung Yelyo stomped her feet in anger and returned to Zhang Meng's side. "Jean de Gue, Han Yuchao must have done this. I won't let him off." Looking at the people who were shouting the most fiercely, Zhang Meng laughed in his heart. Weren't they Han Yuchao's lackeys from the other day? Thinking about how the Tiangongmen and Kikyaman already had such a relationship, Han Yuchao still wanted to use this method to get Lung Yelyo. Zhang Meng found it laughable. Hearing the cheers from the audience, Han Qingyun was stunned at first, but then he was overjoyed. If his little brat could get Sun Xiaoer's daughter, then his chances of getting Sun Xiaoer would be even higher. At this point, not only did Han Qingyun not stop this, but he even began to clap. Sun Xiaoer was so angry that her face turned green. The main reason why she let her daughter represent Kikyaman was because she didn't want Han Guiyun and Han Yu to know about Zhang Meng. That was why she let her daughter represent Kikyaman. Who would have thought that Han Yuchao would come up with such a bad idea? After the cheers from the crowd had stopped, Han Qingyun stood up and waved his hand to the audience as he announced loudly. "Before the competition starts, let me explain the rules. The competition will follow the old rules. Everyone saw the sabers hanging on the weapon rack. From left to right, each saber has a level. Whoever has the higher level of equipment resistance will be the final winner." At this point, Han Qingyun paused for a moment and turned to look at Sun Xiaoer before continuing to speak loudly. In addition, both the Tiangongmen and Kikyamen have a prize for this competition. In order to value this competition, the Tiangongmen have taken out their sect treasure, the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth, as the prize. Kikyamen, on the other hand, doesn't have a treasure that is on par with the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth. Therefore, if Kikyamen loses, Kikyamen will belong to the Tiangongmen and use this as the prize. Since the rules have been set, at this point, Han Qingyun cupped his fist to the judges on his left and right before continuing. Please supervise the competition and maintain the fairness of the competition. After hearing Han Qingyun's words, the judges all stood up and promised that the competition would be fair. These people were highly skilled in martial arts, so they used some inner strength when they spoke. Although there were many people present, their voices were still clearly heard by everyone with the help of their inner strength. Chapter 354. The match began. As soon as Han Qingyun finished speaking, Han Yuchao and Lung Yelio opened the boxes in front of them and took out the equipment inside. As soon as Han Yuchao took out the equipment from the box, the audience gasped in amazement. The equipment was made from deep-sea frosty iron. Its entire body was made of shiny black leaves. The combination between the leaves was compact and delicate. It did not affect the user's movement, nor did it reveal any flaws. The most important thing was that there was actually a faint golden light flashing on the armor plates of this jet black and shiny equipment. This is good stuff. This is a treasure. I wonder if it's for sale. Screw you. Even if it's for sale, can you afford such good equipment? Seeing the equipment made from deep-sea frosty iron, the audience was in an uproar. Other than exclaiming in amazement, there were actually people who wanted to buy the equipment on the spot. Hearing the audience's cheers, Han Qingyun turned to look at Sun Xiaoer proudly and said with a smile, "Sect Leader Sun, our sect's equipment is passable, right?" Hearing Han Qingyun's words and looking at the equipment, Sun Xiaoer's face turned sour. Equipment made from deep-sea frosty iron was already very rare. With the addition of some adamantine, the equipment's level had increased by a lot. It was not an exaggeration to say that if one bought this equipment, it would be more than enough to be a family heirloom. Seeing that Sun Xiaoer did not answer his question, Han Qingyun did not mind and asked again. "Sect Leader Sun, you've seen our sect's equipment. I wonder what equipment Kikyamen has put up. Let's see it." At this moment, the fifth disciple of the Sky Sword sect, Niet Tianhao, suddenly turned to look at Han Qingyun and smiled. "Sect Leader Han, I have an idea. I wonder if I should say it?" After hearing Niet Tianhao's words, Han Qingyun turned his attention away from Sun Xiaoer and turned to look at Niet Tianhao with a smile. "Brother Niet, you're too polite. Given our relationship, just say the word. As long as I can do it, I'll definitely do it for you." Upon hearing Han Qingyun's reply, a smile appeared on Niet Tianhao's face. He cupped his fists and said, "Sect Master Han, would you be willing to sell this equipment to our sect after the competition?" Hearing this, Han Qingyun laughed heartily and waved his hands. "Old brother Niet, you're too courteous. If old brother Niet needs this equipment, given our relationship, how could I not agree to it?" Seeing that Han Qingyun had agreed, Niet Tianhao hurriedly cupped his fists and thanked him. "Thank you, Sect Leader Han, for your generosity." The third disciple of the sword crafting sect, Yun Jianbai, also smiled and said, "Sect Master Han, this equipment is completely black. Looking at its color, it should be made from deep-sea cold iron. Am I right?" Hearing this, Han Qingyun nodded proudly. "Brother Yun, you have good eyesight indeed. You are indeed a genius of the sword crafting sect. You were able to identify the material used to make this equipment at a glance. I'm impressed. Han Qingyun's voice was loud and clear. After he said that, the row of people in front of the audience had already heard him clearly. Instantly, it caused another round of cheers from the crowd. Deep-sea frost iron. I didn't expect Tiangongmen to use deep-sea frost iron to make equipment. Deep-sea frost iron is very rare. Even if an ordinary person wants to see it, it's not easy. I didn't expect to see equipment made from deep-sea frost iron. How rare. Taigalmen are indeed extraordinary. To have such a precious material, they are indeed Taigalmen. After the crowd's cheers had died down, Yun Jianbai said with a smile, Sect Master Han, from what I can see, this equipment is not as simple as it looks on the surface. Speaking up to this point, Yun Jianbai paused for a moment before continuing. If I'm not wrong, this equipment is mixed with adamantine. Sect Master Han, I'm not sure if I'm wrong. Hearing this, Han Qingyun immediately cupped his fists towards Yun Jianbai and praised. You are indeed a sword-crafting master. You are able to see through the mystery of this equipment at a glance. I'm impressed. Deep-sea frost iron is extremely hard and has amazing defense. If you add adamantine, it will increase the toughness of this equipment by a lot, making the defense of this equipment even stronger. Han Qingyun and Yun Jianbai talked tirelessly, showing the demeanor of a great master. However, Sun Xiaoer's face turned pale. She knew from Han Yu that the Taigalmen used deep-sea frost iron as the material for this equipment. Equipment made from deep-sea frost iron was already intimidating to Sun Xiaoer. She did not expect the Taigalmen to spend so much money and mix an adamantine, which was of a higher quality. Although Sun Xiaoer was not a master of metal equipment, it did not prevent her from knowing about adamantine. Adamantine was a material that did not exist in Anwu Kingdom. It could only be transported from the distant magic empire. Legend had it that adamantine was produced by a mysterious race in the magic empire. Not only was it rare, but one would also be attacked by this mysterious race if one wanted to obtain it. It was for this reason that adamantine had almost become a legend. Sun Xiaoer subconsciously glanced at Zhang Meng. She wanted to see how he would react when he heard the name adamantine. At this time, Lung Yelyo also took out Kikyaman's equipment for the competition. When the audience saw the equipment that Lung Yelyo took out, they could not help but gasp at the same time. For a moment, the sound of gasps could be heard everywhere. After a while, a middle-aged man at the front of the audience rubbed his eyes and asked his companion next to him in confusion, Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Why does the equipment that Kikyaman took out look like leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear? Is that true? Another person also nodded in confusion. There's no mistake. Look at the material of the leather armor. It's the skin of a wild bear. There's no mistake about it. For a moment, the audience began to discuss. Although the discussion was not loud, there were so many people discussing it that it became a buzzing noise. Han Qingyun also looked at the leather armor that Lung Yelyo took out in surprise. He could not help but rub his eyes. That's right. It was a leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear. There was no mistake about it. With Han Qingyun's eyes, he could tell at a glance that this was a common item. In Han Qingyun's opinion, Kikyaman did not have any good materials, but they would not use the skin of a wild bear to make leather armor for the competition. Even if they did not have any good materials, they should at least use the skin of a diamond monster to make equipment. How could they use a piece of equipment made from the skin of a wild bear to participate in the competition? Could it be that this piece of equipment made from the skin of a wild bear had some kind of secret? Or could it be that Kikyaman had some special craftsmanship that increased the defense of this piece of equipment? Chapter 355. Han Qingyun looked at the equipment that Lung Yelyo took out in shock. After a while, he turned to Sun Xiaoer and asked curiously, Sect Leader's son, you can't be thinking of using this equipment to participate in the competition, right? Hearing Han Qingyun's question, Sun Xiaoer blushed slightly. In front of the Taigalmen's equipment made from deep-sea cold iron, her leather armor made from wild bear skin was indeed not worth mentioning. The two pieces of equipment were not even on the same level. They were worlds apart. Equipment made from deep-sea cold iron was the sky. Equipment made from wild bear skin was the ground. This was the difference between the two pieces of equipment. Sun Xiaoer took a deep breath and calmed herself down. She then said slowly, Sect Leader Han, can I? Hearing Sun Xiaoer admit it, Han Qingyun suddenly sneered. Sect Leader's son, are you messing with me? You're actually using such a lousy piece of equipment To compete with me? Sun Shower turned her head away from Han Qingyun and said indifferently, "Can I?" Han Qingyun was furious. Just as he was about to explode, he suddenly laughed. No matter what equipment Sun Shower took out, he would definitely win. As long as the result did not change, nothing else mattered. Thinking of this, Han Qingyun suddenly turned to look at Sun Shower and laughed softly. "So, Shower's intentions are the same as mine." "What?" Hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Shower was furious. "Sect Leader Han, watch your words. Who's your Chow?" Facing Sun Shower's anger, Han Qingyun sneered in his heart. "As long as my equipment beats your lousy equipment, let's see what reason you have to be arrogant in front of me." The 8th disciple of Medicine King Pavilion, Fan Yin, who was sitting beside Sun Shower, looked at the equipment that Lung Yelyo took out. He was stunned for a while before he turned to Sun Shower and said softly, "Sect Leader Sun, although I don't know how to make equipment, it doesn't seem right to bring me to see your equipment." Sun Shower was embarrassed, but she could not do anything. She could only force a smile and say, "It's okay, we added special craftsmanship into this equipment." "Oh." Hearing this, Fanyan nodded as if he understood. Han Yuchao could not help but laugh when he saw Lung Yelyo take out this piece of equipment. "Girl, do you want to use that equipment to compete with mine?" Lung Yelyo didn't even look at Han Yuchao as he said coldly, "Why can't I?" Seeing this, Han Yuchao chuckled. "Sure, of course. No matter what lousy equipment you take out, I will compete with you seriously. Don't worry." At this point, Han Yuchao paused for a moment before continuing in a low voice. "By the way, after the competition, shall I treat you to a meal?" Lung Yilu replied coldly, "Dream on, don't even think about it." When Han Yuchao heard this, he waved his hand and said with a smile, "The past was just a dream. After the competition, won't we become a family? There's no need to distinguish between each other." Lung Yelyo turned to look at Han Yuchao and said angrily, "Who's with you?" Hearing Lung Yelyo's words, Han Yuchao's expression changed. "Lung Yelyo, don't tell me you think that you can win against me with that lousy equipment of yours." Hearing Han Yuchao's words, Lung Yelyo raised his head proudly. "As long as Jean de Gu is here, I will definitely win against you guys." Seeing how confident Lung Yelyo was, Han Yuchao was stunned. He turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked curiously, "Are you his Jean de Gu?" Zhang Meng nodded as an answer. Han Yuchao looked at Zhang Meng, then turned to look at Lung Yelyo, then turned to look at Zhang Meng. Suddenly, he laughed out loud. "Ha!" Han Yuchao pointed at Zhang Meng and turned to look at Lung Yelyo. He laughed and said, "Don't tell me you expect him to win for you? Ha! You're making me laugh to death." Hearing this, Lung Yelyo immediately grabbed Zhang Meng's arm and looked at Han Yuchao with contempt. "If I, Jean de Gu, say that I can win against you guys, then I will definitely win against you guys. Ha!" Seeing Lung Yelyo's blind confidence, Han Yuchao laughed so hard that he couldn't straighten his back. Han Qingyun frowned and looked at Zhang Meng, then turned to Sun Shower and asked curiously, "Sect Leader Sun, is this person your disciple?" Sun Shower shook her head. "No." Hearing this, Han Qingyun said unhappily, "Since he's not Kikyaman's disciple, why is he here to participate in the competition? Let him leave." Just as Han Qingyun was about to raise his hand to ask Zhang Meng to leave, Sun Shower hurriedly said, "Sect Leader Han, no, the young master is my daughter's friend. You can't ask him to leave." Hearing Sun Shower's words, Han Qingyun laughed coldly. "Sect Leader Sun, this competition is only between the Tiangongmen and Kikyaman. Even if Prince Zhang is your friend, he can't be considered as one of Kikyaman's people. Let him leave quickly." Seeing that Han Qingyun was insistent on asking Zhang Meng to leave, Sun Shower's forehead started to sweat. Their competition this time was completely dependent on Zhang Meng's family's ultimate skill. Even though Zhang Meng's family's ultimate skill was extremely powerful, its weakness was also very obvious. After adding the skill to the armor, the duration was very short. Therefore, Zhang Meng had to be present. Otherwise, it wouldn't be effective. Sun Shower said loudly, "No, I don't agree. Even though Prince Zhang isn't one of Kikyaman's people, he's our friend. He can be considered as representing Kikyaman in this competition. Sun Shower, who had always been calm, was now so agitated that she wanted Zhang Meng to stay. Seeing this scene, Han Qingyun's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He looked at the armor made of wilderness hide in front of Lung Yelyo and suddenly understood. Kikyaman dared to use this lousy equipment to participate in the competition. Could it be because of this young man in front of him? Han Qingyun wasn't stupid. If he was, he wouldn't have stood out from all his fellow disciples and become the vice-sect leader of the Taiyangolmen. Seeing how agitated Sun Xiaoer was because of this young man, Han Qingyun was certain that this young man wasn't simple. He might be the reason why Kikyaman dared to use this lousy equipment to participate in the competition. At this thought, Han Qingyun said tentatively, No one is allowed to stay in the competition venue except for Kikyaman's people and Taiyangolmen's people. After saying this, Han Qingyun paid attention to Sun Shower's expression to see if his guess was right. Sure enough, Han Qingyun saw that Sun Shower's forehead was covered in sweat after hearing this. No, I won't agree to let Prince Zhang leave no matter what. Seeing Sun Shower's expression, Han Qingyun suddenly understood. He turned his head to look at Zhang Meng, but he was a little confused. Who was this young man? Could it be that he knew how to make equipment? But that couldn't be right. At his age, even if he knew how to make equipment, he wouldn't be able to do it. Chapter 356. Although Han Qingyun had guessed Sun Shower's thoughts, he was still a little confused. He could not figure out what Sun Shower was relying on. However, Han Qingyun was very cautious. He admitted that he had guessed wrong, but he was not willing to take the risk. Seeing that Sun Shower was not letting Zhang Meng leave, Han Qingyun had already made up his mind. He had to chase this person away. At the thought of this, Han Qingyun cupped his fists and said to Yun Jianbai, who was next to him, All of you are the judges. You are here for the sake of fairness. This competition is limited to the 7 Skills sect and the Heaven's Craftsman sect. Speaking of this, Han Qingyun turned to look at Zhang Meng, then continued, Now, there's an outsider in the competition, so I suggest that we chase this outsider out. Otherwise, I think this is unfair. Hearing Han Qingyun's words, Yun Jianbai nodded. Sect leader Han is right. Speaking of this, Yun Jianbai turned to look at Sun Xiaoer and said with a smile, Sect leader Sun, Sect leader Han is right. This competition is between Kikyaman and Taiyangolmen. It is indeed inappropriate for an outsider to be present. Sect leader Sun, please give the order to have this person leave as soon as possible. After hearing Yun Jianbai's words, Sun Xiaoer stood up anxiously and said loudly, No, I don't agree. Although Prince Zhang is an outsider, since he is our friend, he should be considered a member of Kikyaman. He should stay. Seeing this, Han Qingyun was even more certain that there was a problem. He quickly stood up and said loudly, This won't do. We must make him leave. Didn't we agree that this competition is between the 7 Skills sect and the Heaven's Craftsman faction? No outsiders are allowed to come near. Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer sneered and pointed at the people in the audience. She said angrily, Since outsiders are not allowed to interfere, then what are these people doing? Aren't they outsiders? After hearing Sun Xiaoer's question, and Qingyun waved her hand. Sect leader Sun, you're wrong. Everyone in front of you is a guest of our Taiyangolmen. They were invited by us to come here to observe, and the Taiyangolmen welcome them. At this point, Han Qingyun pointed at Zhang Meng and said coldly, But this person wasn't invited, and the Taiyangolmen don't welcome him either. So, I'd like to ask clan leader Sun to order him to leave, so that we don't lose face. When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she sneered, You're welcome. If we don't leave, do you think you can get someone to chase him away? Hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Han Qingyun's face immediately turned solemn. For such an important occasion, those who weren't invited will naturally be chased out. If this person doesn't want to leave by himself, then we won't mind chasing him out. When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she said angrily, You dare? At most, we won't participate in the competition, so that we don't have to suffer here. Han Qingyan sneered. He stretched out his hand and pointed to the surroundings. He said indifferently, "Today's guests are all important figures from various sections. In front of these people, do you think sect leader Sun can just leave?" Sun Shower glared at Han Qingyan. "Clan leader Han, what will it take for you to let him stay?" Han Qingyan shook his head. "That's impossible. I won't allow anyone to break the rules. This person came to participate in the competition without being invited. This is clearly breaking the rules. I must chase him out." When Sun Shower heard this, she said angrily, "Fine then. Today's competition between our Kikyaman and your Taingongman is over. Don't mention it again." After saying this, Sun Shower turned to leave. "Stop right there." Han Qingyan said angrily, "Clan leader Sun, do you think we're all 3-year-old children? You think you can leave just like that? Let me tell you, if you dare to leave today, don't blame me for being rude." When Sun Shower heard this, she turned to look at Han Qingyan and sneered, "Clan leader Han, if you're going to be rude to me, I'd like to know how you're going to deal with us." When he heard Sun Shower's words, Han Qingyan sneered and turned to the crowd with cupped fists. "As everyone can see, our Taingongmen are open and above board. We want to compete with Kikyaman in a fair and just manner. However, Kikyaman wants to do such a thing. I, Han Qingyan, hereby announce that if Kikyaman wants to withdraw, then the Taingongmen and Kikyaman will be irreconcilable. Please bear witness to this." When Fan Yin of the Medicine King Pavilion saw this, he quickly stood up and said loudly, "Everyone calm down. We can talk this out." At this point, Fan Yin waved to Han Qingyan and said, "Clan leader Han, please take a seat." Fan Yin then turned to Sun Shower and said, "Clan leader Sun, please take a seat too. Let's not quarrel over such a small matter. We can all sit down and discuss this. I'm sure we'll be able to come up with a suitable solution." When Fan Yin tried to persuade her, Sun Shower had no choice but to sit down again. When the two of them sat down, Fan Yin said again, "Both of you have a point. I think we should discuss a solution that will satisfy both sides." When Sun Shower heard this, she sneered, "What's there to discuss? Prince Zhang must not leave. Otherwise, Kikyaman will withdraw from the competition." Seeing Sun Shower's stubborn attitude, Fan Yin had no choice but to turn to Han Qingyan. Just as he was about to speak, Han Qingyan spoke first. "Brother Fan, I won't agree to this. This person is not from Kikyaman. We can't let him stay. Otherwise, it will break the rules of the competition." When he heard their words, Fan Yin smiled helplessly. "The two of you are really something. You're both clan leaders. How can you say such things out of anger? All right, let's both take a step back and state our bottom lines. Let's quickly resolve this matter." Fan Yin paused for a moment before continuing with a smile. "Quickly resolve this matter. Let's quickly settle this matter. We're still waiting to watch this match. Don't you guys agree?" Yin Jianbai looked at Han Qingyan. He didn't understand what was going on. In fact, when two sects were fighting, many people would ask for helpers to help their sects win. Although doing so was somewhat against the rules, everyone tacitly agreed to it, and no one looked into it. However, what Yin Jianbai didn't understand was why Han Qingyan insisted on letting the young man leave. Both sides were competing on the defensive power of their equipment, not their martial arts. Even if Kikyaman had one more person present, it wouldn't affect the outcome of the competition. When he thought of this, Yin Jianbai looked at Han Qingyan and said with a smile, "Clan leader Han, this young man is only watching from the side. He shouldn't affect the competition. Why don't we let him stay?" After hearing Yin Jianbai's words, Han Qingyan flatly refused. "Brother Yin, no, absolutely not. The competition is between Kikyaman and Taingongman. No outsiders are allowed to participate." Chapter 357. After hearing Han Qingyan's words, Yin Jianbai turned to look at Sun Shower and asked with a bitter smile, "Leader Sun, Leader Han insists on letting this person leave. What do you think?" This time, before Sun Shower could reply, and yet Tianhao from the Sky Sword sect spoke up, "Sect Master Sun, you're only asking him to leave. It shouldn't affect your results in the competition, right? Why don't you just ask him to leave? After hearing their words, Sun Shower sneered and said resolutely, "No way. Even if I don't participate in the competition today, I won't let Prince Zhang leave." After hearing Sun Shower's reply, Han Xingyan sneered and said, "Leader Sun, let me tell you, if you dare to leave, you'll lose the competition. According to our previous agreement, Kikyaman will disappear from the world." Sun Shower heard this and said angrily, "You're the ones who didn't keep your word first. We only have one more person. Why can't you let go of this?" Speaking up to this point, Sun Shower turned her head to look at the judges and said loudly, "Judges, I believe that you have all participated in the competitions of the various sects in the past. Who hasn't asked for help? Why is sect leader Han still clinging on to this point? Isn't he intentionally looking for trouble? If this goes on, how can the competition be fair? Since the Tiangongmen broke the rules first, Kikyaman can't participate in the competition. There's nothing wrong with that." When she said this, Sun Shower really didn't want to participate in the competition. When she saw the shining golden equipment, Sun Shower's heart felt weak. Even if the Tiangongmen only brought out equipment made of deep-sea frosty iron, Sun Shower wasn't confident that they could win the competition. Moreover, the other party had added precious adamantine to the deep-sea frosty iron, which raised the quality of the equipment to another level. In the face of such equipment, Sun Shower had basically lost all hope of winning. Although Zhang Meng had already shown her his ancestral skills, no one dared to say how strong it was. Sun Shower guessed that if the equipment made of deep-sea frosty iron alone could withstand 9 levels of damage, then with the addition of adamantine, it could withstand 10 levels of damage. This kind of terrifying defensive power already made Sun Shower have a feeling of looking up to it. Although Zhang Meng's performance at that time was able to block a level 6 attack with a normal leather armor, the difference between a level 6 and a level 10 was not small. It was a whole level 4. Sun Shower found it hard to believe that a single skill from Zhang Meng could improve a piece of equipment by so much. Kikyaman's equipment for this competition was leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear. The wilderness bear's hide wasn't of high quality. Without special crafting, it could only block a level 3 attack. Even with special crafting, it could only block a level 4 attack. There was a gap of 6 levels between level 4 and level 10. Could Zhang Meng's ancestral skill increase the quality of the item by 6 levels? Sun Shower didn't think it was possible. As a master equipment maker, she knew better than anyone how difficult it was to improve a piece of equipment's defensive power. The most important aspect of a piece of equipment's defensive power was the material itself. If the material's defensive power was 3, then with the addition of a master equipment maker, the equipment's defensive power could reach level 4. If it was made by a super master equipment maker, then the equipment's defensive power could reach level 5. Adamantine's quality could be said to be quite high. Even so, when mixed with deep-sea frosty iron, it could only increase a piece of equipment's defensive power by 1 or 2 levels. This meant that the higher the defensive power of a piece of equipment, the more difficult it was to increase it by 1 level. If the difficulty was 1, then increasing a piece of equipment's defensive power from level 1 to level 2. Then, the difficulty of increasing a piece of equipment from level 9 to level 10 would be 100. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was to increase a piece of equipment's defensive power. Wanting to increase a piece of equipment's defensive power to such a frightening degree with just a single skill was simply impossible. At this point, Sun Shower could only hope that one of the judges would say that there was no need for the competition. Although the possibility of this happening was very low, Sun Shower felt that it was more likely than having Zhang Meng improve the equipment. It wasn't that Sun Shower didn't believe in Zhang Meng, but she really didn't expect the Tiangongmen to put in so much effort and use such good materials to participate in this competition. If Sun Shower's guess was correct, the shiny piece of equipment that the Tiangongmen were going to use for the competition was definitely not lower than level 10. It might even be higher than that. This piece of equipment could be considered a rare piece of equipment. However, although Sun Shower's idea was good, Han Xingyan wouldn't give her the chance. Looking at Sun Xiao's endless debate, Han Xinyan was even more certain that there was a reason why Kikyaman dared to use a piece of leather armor made from wilderness hide in the competition. And, judging from Sun Xiao's expression, this reason was definitely related to this person. Although Han Xinyan didn't know what the connection was, he didn't want to take the risk. If something unexpected happened, it wouldn't just be a matter of the Tiangongmen and Kikyaman's competition. The reason why Han Xinyan took out such a precious piece of equipment to participate in the competition was because he wanted to win this competition in a crushing manner. His target this time wasn't just Kikyaman's small sect. He had already taken a liking to the skills of a few small sections. He wanted to use this opportunity to give these small sects a warning and show them how strong the Tiangongmen were. It was wishful thinking for them to go against the Tiangongmen. If he achieved his goal this time, he believed that if he wanted to subdue other small sects in the future, he would be able to achieve his goal very quickly with this kind of power. Therefore, Han Xinyan couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Even if he knew that the equipment he was going to use was much better than the opponent's lousy piece of equipment, he couldn't take the risk. If he failed this time, outsiders would think that the Tiangongmen couldn't even beat a small Kikyaman. Why did other people have to submit to the Tiangongmen? Why did they have to submit to the Tiangongmen? And among the Tiangongmen, Han Xinyan's reputation would be ruined. Don't forget, among Han Xinyan's fellow disciples, there were still many who were eyeing the position of vice leader. If Han Xinyan failed this time, they would definitely take the opportunity to cause trouble on the streets. They would try to push Han Xinyan down and take the position of vice leader. Therefore, Han Xinyan couldn't let himself fail. If he failed, the consequences would be unimaginable. He might even be pushed down from the position of vice leader. Of course, Han Xinyan wouldn't do anything that didn't benefit him. If this matter was successful, it would bring him too many benefits. Chapter 358. If this were to succeed, Han Xinyan would reap even more benefits. Han Xinyan's target wasn't just a small Kikyaman. As long as he could crush Kikyaman, he could use this momentum to take in even more smaller sections. By then, with the addition of these smaller sects, the strength of the Tiangongmen would increase tremendously. With these achievements, Han Xinyan's position as the vice master would be unshakable. It was also because of these reasons that Pan Xinyan would not allow anything to ruin his plans. Even if it was a small matter, he would not allow any accidents to happen. Seeing that neither of them was willing to back down, the judges were helpless. Fan Yin suddenly spoke up. Since both Master Han and Master Sun are unwilling to back down, why don't we compromise? What do you think? At this point, Fan Yin paused for a moment before continuing. Since Grandmaster Han wishes for this man to leave, we shall allow him to leave then. Hearing Fan Yan's words, Sun Xiao panicked. She was about to defend herself when Fan Yin waved his hand and interrupted her. Master Sun, don't be hasty. I'm not done yet. Please listen to me first. It won't be too late for you to continue. Since Master Han wants this person to leave, we'll let him leave. Since Master Sun doesn't want this person to leave, why don't we just let him stay? Hearing this, everyone turned to look at Fan Yin. Sun Xiao asked curiously, then what should we do? Hearing Sun Xiao's question, Fan Yin pointed to the spectator's stand and smiled. We can let this young master sit on the spectator's stand and watch. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? If this person leaves the arena, it'll be in line with Master Han's wishes. If this person sits on the spectator's stand and doesn't leave the arena, it'll be in line with Master Sun's wishes as well. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? Master Han, Master Sun, what do you think of this idea? After hearing Fan Yan's words, Han Xinyan looked at the spectator stands and then looked at the competition arena. He thought for a while and felt that even if this person wanted to do something, it would be difficult for him to do so at such a distance. Thinking of this, Han Xinyan nodded and said with a smile, if that's the case, we'll listen to Brother Fan. As long as this person sits in the audience, I have no objections. After hearing Han Xinyan's words, Fan Yin turned to look at Sun Xiao and asked with a smile, Sect Leader Sun, do you agree with this plan? After hearing Fan Yan's idea, Sun Shower's gaze had been fixed on the distance between the spectator stand and the competition venue. Her frown deepened. Although the distance between the spectator stands and the arena wasn't far, it was still at least 15 meters. At such a distance, he didn't know if Prince Zhang's ancestral skill could still be used. If Prince Zhang's ancestral skill had a distance limit, would it be effective at a distance of 15 meters? After hearing Fan Yan's question, Sun Shower didn't know how to answer for a moment. This time, Kikyaman dared to use this leather armor in the competition mainly because of Zhang Meng. If Zhang Meng couldn't be used, then this competition would become a joke. Seeing Sun Shower hesitate, Han Qingyun sneered. Sect leader Sun, what do you mean by this? This sect leader has already taken a step back and allowed your person to sit in the spectator stands. Are you still not satisfied? At this point, Han Qingyun sneered again. Sect leader Sun, do you want to cheat in this competition? That's why you can't let this person leave. Am I right? If that's the case, I advise sect leader Sun to surrender obediently. This sect leader will never allow you to cheat. After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Yin Jinbai nodded and advised sect leader Sun, in order to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings, I think it's better to let this person sit in the spectator stands. Seeing that Sun Shower was still hesitating, Sky Sword Sect's Nye Tianhao became impatient. He suddenly said loudly, Sect leader Sun, you're not willing to let this person leave. Are you really thinking of cheating? After hearing Nye Tianhao's accusation, Sun Shower was stunned. She turned to look at her equipment and suddenly gritted her teeth. She said loudly, all right then, I agree. However, I have a request. Prince Zhang must sit in the front of the spectator stands. Otherwise, I won't agree. Han Qingyun didn't care about Sun Shower's condition. If the other party could cheat from such a distance, then Han Qingyun would accept it. Han Qingyun believed that if the other party wanted to cheat from such a distance, even if he was blind, he would definitely be able to see it clearly. Thinking of this, Han Qingyun nodded and turned to look at Fan Yan. He said with a smile, since sect leader Sun has agreed, then let this person leave. The competition can continue as normal. After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Fan Yan nodded in satisfaction. He then shouted at Zhang Meng, who was in the arena. Since this young master isn't from Kikyaman, he can't participate in the competition. After the judges' discussion, everyone has decided to let this young master sit in the spectator stands. Please let this young master leave as soon as possible so that the competition can continue. After hearing Fan Yan shout, Lung Yelyo, who originally had a relaxed expression, suddenly changed. She hurriedly turned to Sun Shower and said loudly, Mother, no, we can't let Zhang Digo leave. After hearing her daughter's words, Sun Shower could only smile bitterly and shake her head. When Zhang Meng saw this, he nonchalantly patted Lung Yelyo and said with a smile, It's okay. I can't help much anyway. It's the same for me to sit in the spectator stands and watch. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Lung Yelyo suddenly became anxious. She hurriedly said, But if you leave, I should. Before Lung Yelyo could finish his anxious words, Zhang Meng waved his hand and interrupted Lung Yelyo. Zhang Meng winked at Lung Yelyo and said with a smile, Don't worry. You will win this competition. I will be watching from the spectator stands. You don't have to worry. When Lung Yelyo heard this, she reluctantly nodded. Okay then, you have to watch closely. Don't be careless. After saying this, Lung Yelyo suddenly moved closer to Zhang Meng's ear and said with a smile, Let me tell you, you can't let me lose. Otherwise, I will be embarrassed in front of so many people. After hearing Lung Yelyo's whisper, Zhang Meng suddenly laughed out loud. Then he said in a low voice, Actually, I also want to see you embarrassed. After saying this, before Lung Yelyo could get angry, Zhang Meng quickly turned around and left. Because of Fan Yan's instructions, the front row of the spectator stands had already been emptied for Zhang Meng. After arriving in front of the empty seat, Zhang Meng sat down and looked up at the arena. Because both sides had reached a consensus, the competition could continue. The competition officially began. Chapter 359. The competition had officially begun. On both sides of the competition table, there was a human-shaped rack. Han Yuchao instructed the Tiangongman's disciples to put their equipment on the human-shaped rack. Then, he looked at Cold Night Willow. On Cold Night Willow's side, since Zhang Meng had left the stage, another Kikyaman's disciple took his place. The disciple of the seven, Xiao, also placed the leather armor he was preparing for the competition on the rack. Both sides finished their preparations. For the sake of fairness, there was only one row of equipment to be tested. This meant that both sides would use the same sword to test their opponent's equipment. As the organizers, the Tiangongmen naturally had to test their equipment first. Han Yuchao turned around and nodded to the Tiangongmen's disciple beside him. The Tiangongmen's disciple nodded. He took the first sword from left to right and went to Kikyaman's equipment. The Tiangongmen's disciple took a look and immediately slashed at the leather armor. Then, he retracted his sword and shouted loudly. Level 1 test complete. The test for both sides was simple and direct. The disciples from both sides would pick up their swords and slash at their opponent's equipment. The first one whose equipment couldn't withstand the attack would lose. Just like that, the disciples from both sides started to increase their swords level by level. Very quickly, the test reached level 4. Seeing that Kikyaman's leather armor had already withstood a level 4 attack, Han Xingyun clapped his hands and turned to look at Sun Xiao with a smile. Kikyaman is indeed extraordinary. I didn't think that a wild bear skin could withstand a level 4 attack. That's quite rare. After hearing Han Xingyun's words, Sun Xiao only nodded her head. Although the wilderness bear skin could only withstand a rank 4 attack, after my own special crafting, Sun Xiao believed that it could withstand a rank 5 attack. Just as Sun Xiao guessed, both sides' equipment withstood a level 5 attack without any damage. Seeing the Tiangongman's disciple walk towards the leather armor with a level 6 sword, Sun Xiao subconsciously glanced at Zhang Meng, who was sitting in the audience. She couldn't help but pray that Zhang Meng's ancestral skill could be used from such a distance. But after watching for a while, Sun Xiao felt her heart sink. Zhang Meng, who was sitting in the audience, didn't make complicated gestures like he did in Kikyaman. He just sat there quietly. Seeing this scene, Sun Xiao's forehead began to exude fine beads of sweat. Didn't that mean that Zhang Gongzi couldn't use his skills at such a distance? If Prince Zhang couldn't use his ancestral skill, Sun Xiao believed that the leather armor that she had personally made wouldn't be able to withstand a level 6 attack. The Tiangongman's disciple stood in front of Kikyaman's leather armor with a level 6 sword and fiercely slashed it down. At this moment, as the sword slashed down on the leather armor, Sun Xiao's heart suddenly jumped, and she stared at the leather armor without blinking. In the blink of an eye, the Tiangongman's disciple who had tested the leather armor withdrew his sword. Sun Xiao hurriedly looked at the area where the sword had slashed and was immediately overjoyed. Unharmed. Seeing this result, Sun Xiao let out a long sigh of relief. Seeing Sun Xiao's expression, Han Xingyun was a little confused. As a master of equipment crafting, although he didn't craft leather armor, it didn't mean that he didn't know anything about leather armor. He naturally knew what level of attack a wild bear's skin could withstand. According to his guess, Kikyaman's leather armor could at most withstand a level 5 attack, and definitely not a level 6 attack. However, the reality was right in front of him. After being slashed by a level 6 sword, Kikyaman's leather armor was still completely unharmed. Seeing this, Han Xingyun felt that he had made the right decision. To be able to make a wild bear's skin armor withstand a level 6 attack, just the craftsmanship alone was definitely a treasure. If Kikyaman joined the Tiangongmen, this craftsmanship would become the Tiangongmen's craftsmanship. Thinking of this, Han Xingyun turned to look at Sun Xiao and said with a smile, I didn't expect Master Sun to be so amazing, to be able to increase the defense of the wild bear skin by so much. How rare. After joining the Tiangongmen, please don't be stingy, Master Sun. Ha! Kikyaman's leather armor could withstand a level 6 attack, and the Tiangongmen's equipment could easily see through a level 6 attack. Since both sides' equipment could withstand a level 6 attack, Then it was time to test the level 7 attack. Seeing his disciple pick up a level 7 sword, Han Xingyun turned to look at Sun Xiaoer again and said with a smile, "Master Sun, I wonder if the equipment you made can withstand a level 7 attack." Hearing Han Xingyun's question, Sun Xiaoer said calmly, "Please wait and see, Master Han. After the test, you will know." Hearing this, Han Xingyun laughed out loud. A leather armor that could withstand a level 6 attack was already considered a top-quality item. If it could withstand a level 7 attack, then it would be a miracle. The wild bear skin was not of high quality, and from Han Xingyun's point of view, being able to withstand a level 6 attack was already the limit. If he wanted to withstand a level 7 attack, Han Xingyun could only laugh to express his thoughts. The Tiangongman's disciple held a level 7 sword in his hand and used all his strength to chop at the leather armor on the shelf. When the disciple retracted his sword, the smile on Han Xingyun's face suddenly froze. Unscathed, Kikyaman's leather armor could withstand a level 7 attack. At this moment, Han Xingyun's heart was in turmoil. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that this leather armor could actually withstand a level 7 attack. Even if it was made of metal, the materials used to withstand a level 7 attack were definitely not ordinary. But he never thought that Kikyaman's leather armor, which was made of wild bear skin, could withstand a level 7 attack. At this moment, Han Xingyun was not the only one who was shocked. Everyone stared at the leather armor with their mouths agape. As the third disciple of the swordsmith sect, although Yun Jianbai did not know how to make leather armor, as a swordsmith master, he still understood the importance of materials. In order to make a good sword, one must have good materials. No matter how high the level of the swordsmith, without good materials, even a swordsmith master would not be able to make a good sword. What was a wild bear? As long as one was a citizen of the Anwu country, one would probably know. What was the quality of a wild bear's skin? Although many people did not know, Yun Jianbai was quite clear. He never thought that a leather armor made of wild bear skin could withstand a level 7 attack. This was simply beyond his imagination. Looking at the unscathed leather armor on the shelf, Yun Jianbai had the urge to go up and take a closer look. He wanted to see what the reason was. Chapter 360. Yun Jianbai wanted to know why Kikyaman's leather armor had such strong defense. It was beyond his imagination. Looking at the leather armor on the shelf, Han Xingyun took a deep breath, then turned to Sun Xiaoer and said with a smile, "I didn't expect Kikyaman to be able to make such a piece of equipment. What a surprise." Among all of them, the one who was the least surprised was Sun Xiaoer. Zhang Ming had already performed for him before. He could make the most ordinary leather armor withstand a level 6 attack. Furthermore, this leather armor, made from the skin of a wild bear, was much stronger in terms of defense than the normal leather armor. It was no surprise that it could withstand a level 7 attack. In Sun Xiaoer's mind, this leather armor should be able to withstand a level 8 attack based on our previous estimates. Don't forget that Prince Zhang didn't use all of his ancestral skill the first time he performed it. This time was different. Sun Xiaoer believed that Prince Zhang must have used all of his strength to perform this ancestral skill. Sun Xiaoer guessed that if he was lucky, it should be able to withstand a level 9 attack. Although the judges were shocked, as long as there was no winner, the competition had to continue. The goal of this competition between the Tiangongman and Kikyaman was not to be a friendly match, but to determine the winner. The Tiangongman's disciple took the level 8 sword from the weapon rack and walked towards Kikyaman's leather armor. There was complete silence in the hall. Everyone was staring at the leather armor without blinking. Finally, the Tiangongman's disciple walked up to Kikyaman's leather armor. He took a deep breath and swung the sword in his hand. It struck Kikyaman's leather armor with lightning speed. As the Tiangongman's disciple put away the sword in his hand, there was a sudden burst of cheers from the audience. Han Xingyun, who had always been as calm as a mountain, suddenly opened his eyes wide. He stared at Kikyaman's leather armor, trying to find traces of it being cut. Unfortunately, This leather armor, made from the skin of a wild bear, was still completely unscathed after a level 8 attack. Seeing this scene, Yun Jianbai couldn't hold it in any longer. He suddenly turned his head to look at Sun Xiao and quickly asked, "Sect Leader Sun, how did you do it? You actually made a leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear withstand a level 8 attack?" It was within Sun Xiao's expectations that this leather armor could withstand a level 8 attack. After hearing Yun Jianbai's question, Sun Xiao replied indifferently, "I'm sorry, but this is a secret of our sect. Please forgive me for not being able to tell you." After asking that question, Yun Jianbai actually regretted it. His question was undoubtedly probing into the secrets of other sects, which was a very immoral thing to do. After hearing Sun Xiao's answer, Yun Jianbai awkwardly turned his head and looked back at the leather armor. He kept thinking about how Kikyaman had done it. Looking at the leather armor that could withstand a level 8 attack, even yet Tianhao of the Sky Sword sect was a little tempted. As an expert swordsman, he naturally understood the importance of agility. Although the Sky Secret sect's equipment had very high defense, it was still made of metal and had certain limitations. This leather armor was different. It was soft and definitely wouldn't affect his agility if he wore it. Most importantly, this leather armor could actually withstand a level 8 attack, which made Nie Tianhao even more tempted. If he wore this leather armor under his long gown, then he would have a certain degree of safety. However, this time, Nie Tianhao was someone invited by the Tiangolman. If he asked for it now, he was afraid that he would immediately offend the Tiangolman. Nie Tianhao pondered for a moment. After the competition was over, he decided to privately discuss this matter with the 7 Possibilities sect. The competition continued. The Tiangolman's equipment could withstand a level 8 attack, which was within everyone's expectations. Everyone in the martial arts world knew about the strength of the deep-sea frosty iron. Being able to withstand a level 8 attack was also within expectations. Moreover, it was mixed with adamantine. It would be strange if it couldn't withstand a level 8 attack. The Tiangolman's disciple took out his level 9 weapon and slowly walked to Kikyaman's leather armor. He took a deep breath and suddenly roared. His entire body leaped high into the air, and with a somersault in the air, he used the momentum to strike the leather armor with his saber. This leap was not to be underestimated. When a person leaped into the air and struck down from the air, their strength would be doubled. In addition to the somersault in the air, the strength of the saber in his hand increased by a few degrees. This saber strike was already his peak saber strike. The saber landed heavily on the leather armor. Even the frame supporting the leather armor couldn't withstand the force of the strike and shook with the force of the saber. The Tiangolman's disciple quickly sheathed his saber and retreated to the side. However, the arena was silent. After a while, a low voice came from the audience. "Am I seeing things? There's no mark on the leather armor." When the people in the audience heard this voice, they suddenly reacted and started to shout excitedly. "That's incredible! Am I seeing things? It can withstand a level 9 attack." The cheers from the audience also woke Han Xingyun up. Han Xingyun retracted his gaze from the leather armor and turned to look at Sun Xiao. He saw that Sun Xiao was calm and didn't seem surprised at all. Han Xingyun was confused. Could it be that Sun Xiao already knew that this leather armor could withstand a level 9 attack? When he thought of this, Han Xingyun's heart was filled with shock. To be able to make such a powerful leather armor, there was probably no one else in the Anwu Kingdom who could do so. He didn't expect that the Kikyaman that he had always looked down on would be able to make such a strong piece of equipment. However, although Han Xingyun was only slightly surprised that Kikyaman's equipment could withstand a level 9 attack, he was secretly happy. He didn't expect that the equipment he made with deep-sea cold iron would lose to Kikyaman's leather armor. If he could get his hands on Kikyaman's technology, the Tiangolman would be like a tiger that had grown wings. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that if the Tiangolman could get their hands on Kikyaman's technology, no one would be a match for the Tiangolman in the equipment-making industry. Thinking about how the Tiangolman would become famous in the future, all thanks to him taking over Kikyaman. This kind of achievement would definitely be remembered by all the Taiangolmen. He might even have a chance to become the sect leader of the Taiangolmen. Thinking of this, Han Qingyun's face flushed red. He looked at Sun Xiaoer and smiled. Well done, sect leader Sunday. I didn't expect you to give me such a big surprise. At this point, Han Qingyun calmed his agitated heart and slowly said, That's right. I hope sect leader Sun will join our sect. Chapter 361. Han Qingyun said with a smile, I hope that after Master Sun joins our sect, you can submit this technology as soon as possible so that our sect can flourish. When the time comes, I won't forget about Master Sun's benefits. Ha! Hearing Han Qingyun's laughter, Sun Xiaoer felt disgusted. She naturally understood what Han Qingyun meant. Even if her leather armor could withstand a level 9 attack, in Han Qingyun's eyes, there was no way they could win this competition. The Taiangolmen's equipment was made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine. Naturally, its defense was extremely strong. It would be impossible for a leather armor to defeat this equipment. To be honest, this leather armor could withstand a level 9 attack. This was already Sun Xiaoer's highest expectation. In Sun Xiaoer's mind, Prince Zhang should be able to withstand a level 9 attack. Looking at the Taiangolmen's shiny equipment, Sun Xiaoer couldn't help but sigh in her heart. This piece of equipment would probably be able to withstand a level 10 attack without any problems, or even higher. Her own leather armor could withstand a level 9 attack, which was already beyond Sun Xiaoer's expectations. To withstand a level 10 attack, in Sun Xiaoer's eyes, it was still a little difficult. Hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Xiaoer groaned inwardly. If they really lost this time, according to the rules of the competition, they would have to join the Taiangolmen. In the face of the rules, they couldn't change anything. If they didn't follow the rules, the Taiangolmen wouldn't let them go, not to mention others. Even if the Taiangolmen didn't pursue the matter, Kikyaman wouldn't be able to establish itself in the martial arts world anymore. Who would believe a sect that didn't keep its promises? When they signed a competition contract, Sun Xiaoer felt that the competition would be between level 8 and level 9, and that it wouldn't exceed that. She never expected the Taiangolmen to use deep-sea cold iron as a raw material to participate in this competition. What was even more hateful was that they even added adamantine, an even rarer metal, to make the defense of this equipment even stronger. The Taiangolmen didn't have a chance to win, and after using such a rare material, they had even less of a chance to win. Sun Xiaoer signed a contract, not because she didn't think of this possibility, but because she didn't think the Taiangolmen would do this. Deep-sea cold iron could only be made once and couldn't be recycled. In other words, no matter what equipment it was made of, it was impossible to reuse it. Although the Heavens Craftsman Gate had a large business, items like deep-sea frigid iron were rare to begin with. Even the Heavens Craftsman Gate didn't have a lot of deep-sea frigid iron stored. They might even only have enough to make 2 pieces of equipment. It would be a pity if they wasted half of such a small amount of the Taiangolmen. If they were to make a piece of equipment, could make it a piece of equipment, could be a piece, could be sold, as long as the price would be expensive, could be sold a lot. It was because of these reasons that Sun Xiaoer didn't believe that the Heavens Craftsman faction would use the extremely precious deep-sea frost iron as a raw material for this competition, just to deal with a mere 7-skills sect. To be honest, even when Hong Yu said that the Taiangolmen would use deep-sea cold iron to make equipment, Sun Xiaoer didn't really believe it. After all, if the Taiangolmen really did that, they would have to pay a huge price. It wasn't worth it for a small Kikyaman. Unfortunately, Sun Xiaoer was wrong. The Taiangolmen really did do that. Seeing the Taiangolmen's disciple pick up the level 10 sword, and yet Tianhao had the urge to stop him. It would be a pity if such a good piece of leather armor was destroyed by a level 10 sword. However, logic told him that he couldn't do that. When the people of the Heavens Craftsman sect arrived in front of the 7 skills sect's leather armor, the clamor in the field quickly died down. Everyone was staring at the scene closely. A piece of leather armor was going to withstand a level 10 sword attack. Finally, the Tiangonman's disciple slowly raised his sword. Everyone's hearts were in their throats as they watched the sword. They wanted to see if the Kikyaman's leather armor could withstand a level 10 sword attack. The disciple of the Heavens Craftsman sect took a deep breath. As he exhaled, the joints on his body started to make cracking sounds. This time, the Tiangonman's disciple didn't jump up, but everyone could see that the strength of his sword was stronger than before. Sure enough, the moment the Tiangonman's disciple swung his sword, his arms suddenly expanded. The sword in his hand cut through the air and landed on the leather armor like a bolt of lightning. This time, the force of the chop was too strong. Even the frame holding the leather armor made a cracking sound, as if it was about to break. As the Tiangonman's disciple withdrew his sword, the crowd erupted into cheers in the blink of an eye. As the cheers grew louder and louder, Niet Tianhao could no longer hold it in. He stood up abruptly and cupped his fist at Sun Xiaoer. Leader Sun, can you sell this piece of equipment to me? As long as you agree, we can negotiate the price. Sun Xiaoer only snapped out of her shock when she heard Niet Tianhao's voice. She turned to look at Niet Tianhao and only reacted after a long while. I'm really sorry. This competition isn't over yet. Let's talk about it in the future. Hearing this, Niet Tianhao shook his head. Sect Leader Sun, I was too rash. After the competition is over, I hope that Sect Leader Sun can give me a chance to craft a piece of equipment of this level. Sun Xiaoer nodded slowly. No problem. We'll talk about it after the competition. Yin Jianbai was even more shocked when he saw that Kikyaman's leather armor could withstand a level 10 attack. What did it mean for a swordsmith master to be able to withstand a level 10 equipment? What did it mean for a piece of leather armor to be able to withstand a level 10 weapons attack? Even the swordsmith sect didn't have many level 10 weapons. If Kikyaman's leather armor was easy to make, how could the swordsmith sect survive in the future? In the future, if the weapons sold by the swordsmith sect couldn't even cut through leather armor, who would spend a lot of money to buy a good weapon? Yun Jianbai couldn't help but worry. At this point, Han Qingyun was no longer as confident as before. He was only thinking about what would happen if he won, but he didn't think about what would happen if he lost. If he lost, the cauldron of heaven and earth would be handed over to someone else. The cauldron of heaven and earth was a treasure. It wasn't used to refine normal metals, but to refine rare materials. Although there were other items that could be used to refine rare materials, none of them were as useful as the cauldron of heaven and earth. The cauldron of heaven and earth was the treasure of the sect. Chapter 362. The cauldron of heaven and earth wasn't just used for melting rare materials. It could also fuse 2 or even 3 rare materials together. That was its true purpose. If he were to give up the cauldron of heaven and earth just because he lost this competition, he would lose his position as vice faction leader. Cold sweat broke out on Han Qingyun's forehead as he thought of this. According to the level of his equipment, it could withstand a level 12 attack. In Han Qingyun's opinion, such a strong defense was more than enough. However, his opponent was using a leather pouch made from the skin of a wild bear to withstand a level 10 attack. Logically speaking, no matter how good the craftsmanship was, the quality of the wild bear should have been lower than a level 8 attack. However, it had withstood a level 10 attack and was still unscathed. It didn't look damaged at all. Han Qingyun turned to look at Sun Xiaoer and asked, Faction Leader Sun, what's the highest level of attack that your leather pouch can withstand? When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she smiled faintly. Sect Leader Han, won't you know if you continue watching? Why do you have to ask? The competition continued. The Tiangonman disciple was about to pick up a saber when he realized that the sabers on the rack had already been used. The reason why there were only 10 sabers on the rack was because Han Qingyun thought that it would be easy to defeat the Kikyaman within level 10. Hence, he didn't prepare any higher level sabers. In fact, there were only 5 sabers left. Testing here could only be done up to level 15. Looking at the stunned Tiangonman disciple, Han Yuchao, who was standing in the arena, suddenly shouted, What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get your sabers. Seeing Han Yuchao's ashen face, the Heaven's Craftsman faction's disciple hurriedly responded and ran out of the field as fast as he could. It didn't take long for this disciple of the Heaven's Craftsman sect to return to the competition field with several people. After these people hung their sabers, the Tiangongman disciple in charge of testing was about to pick up his saber when he was stopped by Han Yuchao. Han Yuchao whispered a few words into the disciple's ear. The disciple nodded and quickly ran out of the field. After a while, Shun Fei walked in from outside the field. Nie Tianhao's eyes narrowed when he saw Shun Fei enter the arena. Shun Fei was his disciple, so he naturally knew who he was. When Nie Tianhao saw Shun Fei, he turned to look at Han Qingyun and asked curiously, "Sectmaster Han, why did you change your leader?" When Han Qingyun saw this scene, he naturally knew why Han Yuchao wanted to change people. In the Heavenly Sword sect, the sectmaster was an 8th-generation disciple. Nie Tianhao was a 9th-generation disciple, and Shun Fei was a 10th-generation disciple. Although Shun Fei's martial arts were not as good as the 9th-generation disciples, but among the 10th-generation disciples, he could be considered one of the top disciples. If Shun Fei were to attack, he would have a greater chance of destroying Kikyaman's wallet. When he heard Nie Tianhao's question, Han Qingyun quickly cupped his hands and said, "I've long heard that Brother Nie's disciple is highly skilled in martial arts, but I've never seen him in person. Today, I hope you won't mind letting us witness it for ourselves." When Nie Tianhao heard this, he hesitated for a moment. He subconsciously glanced at Sun Xiao and said slowly, "This isn't very appropriate." Shun Fei was his disciple, so he naturally knew Shun Fei's strength. If Shun Fei were to attack, he was afraid that the difficulty of Kikyaman would increase by 1 level. When she heard the conversation between Nie Tianhao and Han Qingyun, Sun Xiao's expression changed. She could already tell that the young man who had just arrived at the arena was Nie Tianhao's disciple. Who was Nie Tianhao? Sun Xiao naturally knew very well. The 5th disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect had unfathomable skills, and the disciples he taught were definitely not ordinary in martial arts. The fact that this leather armor could withstand a level 10 attack was already beyond her expectations. If Nie Tianhao's disciple had attacked, Sun Xiao felt that her leather armor might not have been able to withstand his attack. When she thought of this, Sun Xiao was about to reject him, but she suddenly had a thought. Her leather armor had already withstood a level 10 attack, so it was probably at its limit. Sun Xiao guessed that no matter how powerful Zhang Meng's family's ultimate technique was, it would definitely not be able to withstand a level 11 attack. Since it couldn't withstand the attack, then she would let Nie Tianhao's disciple do it. When the time came, even if her leather armor couldn't withstand the attack, she would still have an excuse to refuse. When she thought of this, Sun Xiao pretended to be angry and looked at Han Qingyun. She said loudly, "Sect leader Han, you're not following the rules. You clearly said that only the people from Kikyaman and the Tiangongman could fight. But now, you want the people from the Heavenly Sword sect to fight. What kind of logic is this?" After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Han Qingyun's face turned slightly red. He then smiled and said, "Sect leader's son, you've misunderstood. Although this is Brother Nie's disciple, he has temporarily joined the Tiangongman. He can be considered a disciple of the Tiangongman. Letting him fight this time isn't considered breaking the rules." After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Xiao turned to look at Nie Tianhao and sneered, "Hero Nie, is that so? Your disciple has now become a member of the Tiangongman?" After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Nie Tianhao suddenly felt embarrassed. He turned to look at Han Qingyun. Just as he was about to ask, he saw Han Qingyun giving him a look. When Nie Tianhao saw this, he could only sigh inwardly. He then turned to look at Sun Xiao and said with a smile, "Sect leader's son, although Shun Fei is my disciple, he can be considered a member of the Tiangongman. He can be considered a member of the Tiangongman." When Sun Xiao heard this, she turned to look at Han Qingyun again. She sneered and asked, "Sect leader Han, is that true? Shun Fei can be considered a member of the Tiangongman, because he has a relationship with you? When Han Qingyun heard this, he quickly nodded and answered, Sect leader's son, that's true. Brother Nye is right. Shen Fei does have a relationship with me. He could be considered a member of the Tiangolman. After hearing Han Qingyun's explanation, Sun Xiao nodded and said, Since that's the case, I'll believe you this time. At this point, Sun Xiao paused for a moment, then continued with a cold smile. However, if I find out in the future that Shen Fei isn't actually a member of the Tiangolman, don't blame me for not recognizing this competition. After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Han Qingyun couldn't help but frown. He muttered to himself in his heart. He felt that Sun Xiao couldn't find any loopholes in his words, so he said with a smile, Don't worry, Sect Leader Sunday Shen Fei is definitely a member of the Tiangolman. There's no mistake about that. After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Xiao was secretly delighted. She hurriedly turned to look at Fan Yan and said with a smile, Sect Leader Han Qingyun heard Fan Yan's words. Master Fan, you heard what Sect Master Han and Master Nye said just now. If there's anything wrong with what you said, then don't blame me, Sun Xiao, for not acknowledging this match. Chapter 363. After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Fan Yin turned to look at Han Qingyun and slowly nodded. Well said. Since no one has any objections, I have nothing to say. Hearing Fan Yan's answer, Sun Xiao nodded in satisfaction. She turned to Yun Jianbai and asked with a smile, Master Yun, do you have any objections to what I said just now? Yun Jianbai shook his head. This competition is between Kikyaman and Tiangolman. As long as no one has any objections, I have nothing to say. After hearing their answers, Sun Xiao returned to her seat. This time, it was Shen Fei's turn to test for the Tiangolman. Seeing Shen Fei go up, Han Yuchao sneered in his heart. Han Yuchao was very clear about Shen Fei's strength. If Shen Fei were to test, the difficulty of Kikyaman would increase by 1 level. Shen Fei already knew the rules of the test. He slowly walked to the weapon rack and picked up the 11th saber. Seeing Shen Fei walk to the leather armor, Lung Yelyo suddenly stood in front of him and said loudly, No, you're not Tiangolman. You can't be the one to test. Shen Fei was not willing to come. Seeing Lung Yelyo standing in front of him, he quickly turned to look at Han Yuchao to see what he meant. Seeing this, Han Yuchao quickly walked to the two and said loudly, Sister Lu, what are you doing? Lung Yelyo said coldly, He's not Tiangolman. He can't be the one to test. Hearing this, Han Yuchao sneered. Didn't you hear what the judges said just now? Since the judges have agreed, why are you still standing here? Saying this, Han Yuchao suddenly laughed. Are you afraid? Hearing this, Lung Yelyo was furious. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Sun Xiao's voice. Lil Lu, step back and let them test. Hearing his mother's words, Lung Yelyo could not help but grit his teeth and stomp his feet. Only then did he snort and step aside. Seeing that no one was ruining the competition this time, Han Yuchao patted Shen Fei's shoulder and said in a low voice, Whether or not the Tiangolman can win the competition depends on you. After listening to Han Yuchao's words, Shen Fei nodded. Don't worry, I will do my best. Hearing Shen Fei's words, Han Yuchao nodded in satisfaction. Shen Fei slowly walked to Kikyaman's leather armor and began to carefully examine it. Even though he didn't come to the arena, he could still see what was happening from afar. A piece of armor made from the hide of a wild bear could actually block a 10th rank attack. That was simply unbelievable. Shen Fei wanted to take a closer look to see what was so different about this leather armor that it could actually withstand a level 10 attack. But no matter how many times Shen Fei looked at it, he couldn't see any difference between it and ordinary leather armor. Shen Fei gripped the hilt of the testing knife and stared at the leather armor. He then turned to look at Han Yuchao. Seeing this, Han Yuchao immediately shouted, Begin the test immediately. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Shen Fei didn't dare to delay. He raised his hand that was gripping the hilt of the knife and slowly raised it above his head. Then, with a low growl, The long knife above Shun Fei's head immediately emitted a bright light that shone in the air. The light of the knife flashed in the air. Finally, the dazzling light gathered on the leather armor on the rack and disappeared without a trace. Everyone only saw the flash of light, and only the knife was left to cut the leather armor. This knife was very fast and very powerful. With Shun Fei's strength, the power of this knife was definitely much stronger than that of the previous disciple. However, such a fierce knife strike on the rack didn't even cause the armor to shake. This was because all the power of this knife had been gathered at the tip of the knife. Not a single bit of it was wasted. Shun Fei's knife strike didn't have the slightest bit of hesitation. The knife paused for a moment on the leather armor before he immediately withdrew it. The light emitted by the knife blocked everyone's vision. Even the result of Shun Fei's knife strike couldn't be seen. After Shun Fei withdrew his knife, Lung Yelyo, who was standing closest to the leather armor, suddenly screamed. "Success! We succeeded. It really withstood a level 11 attack." "Wow, that's amazing." Hearing Lung Yelyo's cry, the field was still silent. No one spoke. At this moment, no one could believe their eyes. Such a fierce knife strike was actually blocked by a piece of leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear. Lung Yelyo's cheers echoed in Han Qingyun's ears. Hearing this, he woke up from his shock. At the same time, his forehead was covered in cold sweat. At this moment, Han Qingyun's heart suddenly jumped. After such a long time, he finally understood that there was a possibility that he would fail. Thinking of the consequences if he failed, Han Qingyun only felt more and more cold sweat on his forehead. He looked at the leather armor in disbelief. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand how a piece of leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear could block a level 11 attack. Moreover, the Sky Sword Sect's elite disciple, Shun Fei, was also blocked by this piece of leather armor. Han Qingyun turned his head with difficulty and looked at Sun Xiaoer beside him. He said word by word, "Sect Master Sun, you cheated." Sun Xiaoer, who was already dumbfounded, smiled faintly when she heard Han Qingyun's words. "Sect Master Han, then tell me, how did I cheat?" Han Qingyun wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead and pointed at the leather armor on the stage. "If you didn't cheat, how could that lousy leather armor of yours withstand a level 11 attack? I don't believe it. You must have cheated," he said angrily. Hearing Han Qingyun's accusation, Sun Xiaoer slammed the table and said angrily, "Sect Master Han, who is cheating?" In order to win this match, you didn't hesitate to let an expert from the Sky Sword Sect enter the field. Tell me, is this a violation of the rules? Is this cheating? After hearing Sun Xiaoer's answer, Han Qingyun looked at the leather armor and was stunned for a long time. Then he suddenly slammed the table and said with gritted teeth, "Sect Master Sun, don't be too happy. We're still tied. You haven't won yet." Seeing that Kikyomin's leather armor could actually block Shun Fei's attack, Nie Tianhao felt a little regretful. He regretted agreeing to let Shun Fei take the test. Thinking of this, Nie Tianhao secretly turned his head to look at Sun Xiaoer, wanting to see if she was displeased. At this point, Nie Tianhao really didn't want to offend Kikyomin. He had originally thought that a small Kikyomin was like a small workshop without any ability. If the Tiangongmen wanted to defeat them, it would be a piece of cake. But he didn't expect things to develop to this point. Kikyomin's leather armor, made from the skin of a wild bear, could actually block a level 11 attack. Chapter 364. If Nie Tianhao hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed such a thing even if he was beaten to death. It was beyond Nie Tianhao's imagination that a small company like Kikyomin could create such a heaven-defying piece of equipment. At this point, the competition was no longer important. Even if Kikyomin lost the competition, they would become even more famous. Everyone knew the quality of a wild bear's skin. To be able to make a piece of leather armor out of a wild bear skin with such heaven-defying defensive power, even if Kikyomin lost, it would still be a glorious defeat. Don't forget that the Tiangomen's equipment for this competition was made of deep-sea frost iron and adamantine. It wasn't strange for equipment made of such materials to have a high defensive power because deep-sea frost iron and adamantine were of the highest quality. It wasn't surprising that equipment with such a high defensive power could be made. However, to use a normal wild bear's skin to make a piece of equipment that could withstand a level 11 attack was unexpected. Nie Tianhao couldn't sit still anymore. He wanted to hurry back and report this to his master. Nie Tianhao turned to look at Yun Jianbai, who was beside him, and saw that Yun Jianbai was also shocked. Indeed, Yun Jianbai was extremely shocked. His thoughts were different from Nie Tianhao's. Nie Tianhao thought that after wearing this piece of equipment, its defensive power would be very strong and it would be safer. However, that wasn't what Yun Jianbai was thinking. He was thinking if this kind of technology could be added to the forging of swords. If it was possible, it would definitely bring about an earth-shattering change. It wasn't easy to make a level 11 weapon. It required relatively good materials and excellent crafting skills to make a level 11 weapon. If Kikiamen's technology was used to forge swords, would it be possible to use ordinary iron to make a level 11 weapon? If it was possible, the results would definitely be unimaginable for Yun Jianbai. Among the judges, the one who was the most shocked was Sun Qiao herself. Sun Qiao didn't expect this leather pouch to be able to withstand a level 11 attack. According to her initial guess, being able to block a level 10 attack was already beyond her expectations. It was for this reason that she allowed Shun Fei to test the leather armor. Now, Sun Qiao was a little regretful. According to Sun Qiao's estimation, Shun Fei's attack just now was so strong that even if it did not reach level 12, it was not far from it. According to Sun Qiao's guess, the Tiangomen's equipment could at most withstand a level 12 attack. Since the opponent's equipment could only block attacks up to LVL 12, under normal circumstances, he might even be able to fight the opponent to a draw with his equipment. Thinking of this, Sun Qiao's intestines turned green with regret. If she had known this would happen, she would never have allowed Shun Fei to enter the arena if this leather armor could withstand Shun Fei's all-out attack. When Shun Fei made his move, Sun Qiao could already tell that this was definitely not his full-strength attack. If he used his full strength later, she would be at a disadvantage. Thinking of this, Sun Qiao stood up abruptly and said loudly to Fan Yin, who was beside her, "Master Fan, I don't think we should let Shun Fei fight anymore. This is unfair. I hope the Tiangomen can be replaced." Hearing Sun Qiao's words, Fan Yin was stunned for a moment. Then he turned to look at Han Qingyun and asked tentatively, "Sect Master Han." You see, hearing Fan Yin's question, Han Qingyun didn't wait for him to finish and immediately waved his hand to interrupt him. "Brother Fan, you don't have to say anymore. I understand what you mean. Okay, I won't let Shun Fei fight anymore." Originally, Fan Yin was worried that Han Qingyun wouldn't agree. He didn't expect Han Qingyun to agree so easily. Fan Yin quickly smiled and said, "Sect Master Han is indeed a reasonable person. I admire you." While talking to Han Qingyun, Fan Yin turned to look at Sun Qiao and said with a smile, "Sect Master Sun, you heard what Sect Master Han said just now. For the sake of fairness, he won't let Shun Fei fight anymore." Of course, Sun Qiao heard Han Qingyun's words clearly. She also didn't expect Han Qingyun to agree so easily. Thinking that they could have a fair fight, Sun Qiao's confidence suddenly increased. "Thank you, Sect Master Han, for being so understanding." Han Qingyun waved his hand to a Tiangomen disciple beside him and asked him to come over. When the disciple came over, Han Qingyun whispered a few words in his ear, and the disciple hurriedly ran away. Hearing that he could leave, Shun Fei let out a long sigh of relief. This was a matter of the Tiangomen. To be honest, he didn't want to interfere, but he had no choice but to do so. Letting him leave at this moment was exactly what he wanted. Without further ado, he saluted Han Yuchao with his fists and turned to leave the competition area. Logically speaking, after Shun Fei withdrew, that disciple of the Heaven's Craftsman sect who had just taken the test should go on stage. However, after a while, that disciple still didn't go on stage. Seeing this, Fan Yin turned to look at Han Qingyun and asked with a smile, "Sect Master Han, please let the Tiangongmen disciple go up so that we can continue the competition." Hearing Fan Yin's question, Han Qingyun shook his head and said, "Please wait for a moment. The disciple in charge of the test just now isn't feeling well and has already been asked to leave. We are now looking for the second disciple. Please wait for a moment. He should be here soon." Looking at the calm expression on Han Qingyun's face, Sun Xiao, who originally had some confidence, suddenly had a bad feeling. Could it be that Han Qingyun asked Shen Fei to leave so that someone more powerful could go up? Thinking of this possibility, Sun Xiao's heart skipped a beat. The Tiangongmen had the advantage in numbers. It wasn't very difficult to find an expert. In terms of martial arts, although the Tiangongmen couldn't compare to the Sky Sword sect, they were definitely not to be underestimated. Legend had it that the Tiangongmen's sect master, Zhu Jinshi, had superb martial arts. Although he wasn't as good as the Sky Sword sect master, he was definitely much better than Ye Tianhao. In addition, even Han Qingyun wasn't a simple character. In terms of martial arts, Han Qingyun's martial arts were definitely on par with Ye Tianhao's. If Han Qingyun really wanted to find an expert among the Tiangongmen, it definitely wouldn't be difficult. Thinking of this, Sun Xiao only felt her confidence dwindle. She just realized that with Kikiaman's strength, trying to fight the Tiangongmen head-on was simply overestimating himself. When Shen Fei attacked, just now, Sun Xiao guessed that the difficulty of the test was almost raised by a level. If they found an even more powerful expert, wouldn't the difficulty of the test be raised by a level? Looking at Han Qingyun's expression, Sun Xiao was even more certain that her guess just now might be true. Chapter 365. This time, the Heaven's Craftsman faction had to wait for a long time before the examiners of the Heaven's Craftsman faction arrived at the competition venue. Sun Xiao could not help but exclaim when she saw the man's face. Gu Yunfei. Seeing this person appear, Han Qingyun had already stood up. He cupped his hands and bowed to the person who had come, and said respectfully, "This disciple greets Master." Sun Xiao was not the only one who was shocked. The other judges were shocked as well. Gu Yunfei was the second elder of the Tiangongmen. He was extremely skilled in making equipment, and his martial arts skills were impressive. Most importantly, Gu Yunfei was Han Qingyun's master. Han Qingyun's martial arts skills were taught by Gu Yunfei. Han Qingyun's martial arts skills were almost on par with Ye Tianhao's. One could only imagine how high Gu Yunfei's martial arts skills were. Looking at Gu Yunfei, whose hair had turned white, Ye Tianhao hurriedly stood up and cupped his fists. Junior Ye Tianhao greets Senior. Yun Jianbai and Fan Yin did not dare to be disrespectful when they saw Gu Yunfei. They quickly stood up and bowed. Gu Yunfei, who was standing in the middle of the arena, waved his hand at the three of them. "No need to be so courteous. Today, you are the judges and this old man is the tester. Wait a moment. Please look carefully." Ye Tianhao and the others bowed apologetically again and again. Sun Xiao only recovered from her shock after everyone had bowed. She stood up abruptly and pointed at Han Qingyun. "Master Han, you cheated?" Han Qingyun laughed coldly. "Master Sun, you said I cheated. Isn't my master a member of the Tiangongmen?" Sun Xiao was speechless when she heard Han Qingyun's words. Gu Yunfei was a member of the Tiangongmen. No one could deny that. However, she had never heard of a competition that required an elder of the Tiangongmen to be the tester. At this moment, Sun Xiao understood that Han Qingyun wanted to win this time. No matter the price, he wanted to win. If Gu Yunfei were to take the test this time, Sun Xiao felt that the difficulty of her side would not only increase by one level, but perhaps by two. In other words, the Tiangongmen's equipment would be tested at level 12, while the Tiangongmen's equipment would be tested at level 14. Imagine using the skin of a wild bear to make an armor that could withstand a level 14 attack. Sun Xiao felt a little scared just thinking about it. Based on past experience, equipment made from wild bear skin could at most withstand a level 5 attack. But now, he actually had to use this kind of leather armor to withstand a level 14 attack, which was more than 10 level 14 attacks. No, I can't allow this to happen. Both sides were competing to see who was the winner. Whoever had the higher defensive power of their equipment would be the winner. As the victor, it was only natural for him to win the prize. The price for his side's loss was to join the Heaven's Craftsman faction. Now that her leather armor had reached level 11, it was not easy. Although she did not know who would win, there was still hope. However, the opponent had sent Gu Yunfei to take the test. This made Sun Xiaoer feel that she was not lucky at all. Faction leader Han, you are too despicable. Senior Gu has been famous for many years. Isn't it a little against the rules to ask him to take the test? Han Xinyan smiled and waved his hand. Faction leader Sun, that's not right. Our rules were for the Tiangongmen and Kikyamen to compete. We didn't say who would be the tester. At this point, Han Xinyan smiled faintly. Sect leader Sun, if your 7-skill sect also has experts, it's fine. You can invite them to participate in the test. Han Xinyan, will definitely not object. Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer was furious. She abruptly turned her head to look at Yun Jianbai and the others, asking loudly, shouldn't you, the judges, say something about what the Heaven's Craftsman faction has done? As soon as Sun Xiaoer finished speaking, Han Xinyan did not wait for the others to speak and said, Faction leader Sun, I've already said that any Tiangongmen or Kikyamen disciples can come up and compete with us. Are you still not satisfied? Sun Xiaoer said angrily, Han Xinyan, you know that Kikyamen doesn't have an expert. Are you going to bully us like this? Han Xinyan sighed and said slowly, Faction leader Sun, you're right. I've seen Kikyamen's weakness, and I've kindly invited you to join the Tiangongmen. Han Xinyan paused for a moment before continuing. Faction leader Sun, we Tiangongmen have many talents. We're much better than Kikyamen in terms of equipment, crafting, and martial arts. If Kikyamen joins the Tiangongmen, you won't have to worry about outsiders coming to cause trouble. You can also focus on crafting equipment. How can you let me down? Sun Xiaoer was furious when she heard Han Xinyan's words. Han Xinyan, how can you make it sound so good? You Tiangongmen want to annex Kikyamen. How can you make such a despicable thing sound so righteous? You're really admirable. Speaking up to this point, Sun Quainer coldly laughed. However, even though my 7-skill sect is small, we treat people with honesty. Naturally, we won't allow outsiders to cause trouble. So, I hope that Sect Master Han can keep your intentions to yourself and call off this competition. I thank you for your kind intentions. Han Xinyan's heart skipped a beat when he heard Sun Xiaoer's words. Even though Kikyamen's equipment was made from the skin of a wild bear, there was something strange about it. If he stopped the competition now, he wouldn't lose. Even though it would affect his reputation, it wouldn't hurt his interests. If that was the case, it would be a good thing. Thinking of this, Han Xinyan subconsciously glanced at the competition ground. When he saw the equipment that his side had sent out, his heart skipped a beat. In order to defeat Kikyamen, the Tiangongmen had paid a huge price this time. Even though the Tiangongmen were wealthy, deep-sea frigid iron and adamantine were two materials that couldn't be bought with money. After so many years of accumulation, the Tiangongmen only had enough deep-sea frigid iron to make 3 pieces of equipment. As for adamantine, there was even less of it. Adamantine had to be imported from the Magic Empire. Not only was it a long journey, but it was also very rare in the Magic Empire. Now, in order to win this competition, Han Xinyan had used so much deep-sea frigid iron and precious adamantine. If the competition ended in this way, it would be a big deal. In order to compete with Kikyamen, Han Xinyan had used so many precious items. If the competition ended in this way, someone would definitely report to the faction leader that he had made a mistake in his decision. Chapter 366. Han Xinyan looked at the shiny golden equipment, then at Kikyamen's dull leather armor, and finally at Gu Yunfei. As a disciple, no one knew better than him how powerful his master was. If he were to fight, even a normal weapon would be able to display the power of a peerless master. Thinking of this, Han Qingyun suddenly gritted his teeth and turned to Sun Xiaoer, saying coldly, "Sect leader's son, don't waste your time. Unless you admit defeat in this battle, we will continue until the victor is decided." Before Sun Xiaoer could reply, Yun Jianbai had already interjected before Han Qingyun had finished speaking. "Sect Master Han, since we're going to continue the competition, what should we do about Senior Ge?" When Han Qingyun heard that, he immediately burst into laughter. "Brother Yin, what's there to do? As long as my master is a member of our Heaven's Craftsman faction, he can represent our faction in battle. Is there a problem with that?" Hearing Han Qingyun's reply, Yun Jianbai turned to Sun Xiaoer and asked in a low voice, "Sect Master's son, you see?" Sun Xiaoer didn't wait for Yun Jianbai to finish and interrupted him. "No, definitely not. Although Senior Ge is a member of the Tiangongmen, he can't be a candidate for the test. I won't allow this to happen." Upon hearing this, Han Qingyun sneered, "Sect Master's son, does our Heaven's Craftsman sect need your 7 skills sect's approval to send out anyone to fight?" Sun Xiaoer snorted, "I don't care who you send, but if you send your second elder, then I have to ask." Hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Han Qingyun waved his hand, "Sect Master's son, as I said, if you think it's unfair to send my master, then you can also send someone to participate in the test." Han Qingyun paused and sneered. "Sect Master's son, as long as it's someone from Kikyaman, you can send anyone. I'm not as petty as you. As long as it's someone from Kikyaman, I won't object." When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she was instantly enraged. "Han Qingyun, just now when we sent Prince Zhang out, you did everything you could to stop us. How could you force Senior Ge to step out and not fight for you?" Han Qingyun shook his head. "As I said earlier, Prince Zhang is not a member of Kikyaman. Why should he fight for you? That's why I refused. If Prince Zhang is a member of Kikyaman, I definitely won't object. In fact, I'll even support you in doing so." The two contestants were arguing so fiercely that the judges were at their wits' end, unable to persuade them. Han Qingyun's words made sense. As long as one was a member of the Tiangongmen or Kikyaman, they could participate in the test. Although Gu Yunfei was of noble status and was the second elder of the Tiangongmen, no one could deny that Gu Yunfei was a member of the Tiangongmen. Therefore, it wasn't against the rules for Gu Yunfei to represent the Tiangongmen. However, even though it wasn't against the rules, it wasn't right for a gang's second elder to participate in the test. Moreover, this second elder was highly skilled in martial arts. Even yet, Tianhao, who was the most skilled of the judges, was no match for him. Seeing that Han Qingyun wasn't going to let them off, Sun Xiaoer said angrily, "Since Sect Master Han is being unreasonable, then there's nothing for us to talk about. Let's call it a day. I won't compete with you in the future." After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Han Qingyun burst into laughter. He suddenly took out a contract and placed it on the table. He laughed and said, "Judges, come and take a look. Doesn't it say that as long as someone voluntarily withdraws from the competition, it means that that person has admitted defeat?" Yun Jianbai and the other two hurriedly stood up and looked at the contract. After reading the contract, Fan Yin sighed and turned his head to look at Sun Xiaoer. He said softly, "Sect leader's son, you were also present when this contract was first signed. I'm sure you're very clear about the terms of the contract. It's clearly written that if anyone wants to withdraw from the competition, it means that they have admitted defeat. Sect Master son, I think you should continue. If you don't continue, it means that you've admitted defeat." Looking at the contract on the table, Sun Xiaoer was so angry that her teeth itched. She couldn't wait to tear the contract to shreds. However, that was just a thought. Sun Xiaoer knew that even if she tore the contract, it would be meaningless. The reason why Han Qingyun had gathered so many people was to testify for him. If she tore the contract, it would mean that she had admitted defeat. Seeing Sun Xiaoer's livid face, Han Qingyun sneered and held the contract in his hand. He raised it high above his head and shouted to the audience, "If anyone doesn't believe my words, you can come closer and take a look." If I'm talking nonsense, then I've lost this competition. When the audience heard Han Qingyun's words, there were a few people who were curious. They left their seats and came to the judges' table to check the contract in Han Qingyun's hand. After reading the contract, these people shook their heads and returned to the audience's table. They talked about the terms of the contract with the people next to them. Seeing the situation develop like this, Sun Xiaoer was so angry that her body was trembling. She suddenly turned her head to look at Han Qingyun and said loudly, "Han Qingyun, don't be so smug. The terms of the contract don't state that the elders of our sect can participate. I have the right to refuse." Hearing that, Han Qingyun slapped the table and said with a laugh, "Master Sun, you're being unreasonable. Since my master is a member of our Heaven's Craftsman faction, it's absolutely not against the rules, even if he represents us in battle." At this point, Han Qingyun turned his head to look at the judges and said loudly, "Everyone, since Sect Master Sun doesn't want to continue the competition, I won't force him. Please announce the results of the competition." When they heard Han Qingyun's words, even the audience stopped talking. They all looked over to hear the judges announce the results. When the three judges heard Han Qingyun's words, they subconsciously looked at each other and saw the difficult look in each other's eyes. The Tiangongmen's equipment was made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine. Although its defense was amazing, Kikyomen's equipment was definitely not ordinary. Originally, everyone thought that this super equipment would easily beat Kikyomen's leather armor. They didn't expect Kikyomen to suddenly appear and turn this leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear into a super equipment. The outcome of this match was highly anticipated. Everyone wanted to see if the defensive power of this leather armor could surpass that of the Heaven's Craftsman faction's equipment. Even though Kikyomen's leather armor had lost so far, it was still considered a loss. Chapter 367. Even if Kikyomen lost the leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear, no one would underestimate Kikyomen's craftsmanship. It was a miracle that a leather armor could be made into such a horrifying piece of equipment. Such a miracle was beyond everyone's imagination. Actually, at this point, no one was interested in the Tiangongmen's super equipment anymore. They wanted to see how many levels of attacks Kikyomen's equipment could withstand. Amidst their anticipation, someone in the audience shouted when Han Qingyun was about to ask Kikyomen to surrender. "Sectmaster Sun, you can't surrender. We're still waiting to see how many levels of attacks your equipment can withstand." "Yeah, Sectmaster Sun, you must continue the competition. Sectmaster Sun, we support you." Hearing the commotion from the audience, Han Qingyun's face turned ugly. "Sectmaster Sun, hurry up and say something. Do you want to continue the competition or surrender?" Hearing Han Qingyun's words, Sun Xiaoer looked at the audience, then turned to Han Qingyun and said angrily, "Han Qingyun, as long as you ask Senior Good to step down, we'll continue the competition. Otherwise, even if I lose, I won't accept it." Han Qingyun sneered, "Sectmaster Sun, I don't care if you accept it or not. I only remember that the contract says that if you lose, you'll immediately join the Tiangongmen. There's no room for negotiation." Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer was enraged. She pointed at Han Qingyun and scolded, "Han Qingyun, you're too despicable. Just to win this competition, you're asking your own master to fight." Before Sun Xiaoer could finish, Yun Jinbai stepped up and interrupted her. "Sectmaster Sun, I sympathize with your situation. But Sectmaster Han's actions are not against the rules. The contract clearly states that people other than the Heaven's Craftsman faction and the Seven Skills sect aren't allowed to participate. Senior, although you're an elder of the Heaven's Craftsman faction, it doesn't state that elders of the Heaven's Craftsman faction are not allowed to participate." At this point, Yun Jinbai sighed and continued, "Sect Leader Sun, I see that the defense of your equipment is amazing. You might not lose. Let's continue the competition." When Sun Xiaoer heard this, she immediately panicked. "Master Yun, but Senior Ji's martial arts skills are really too high. If he fights, I'm afraid." Although Sun Xiaoer didn't finish her words, Everyone already understood what she meant. Yun Jianbai said with a wry smile, no one knew this would happen. However, since the Heaven's Craftsman faction didn't violate any rules, if Master Sun refuses to take part in the competition, we'll be in a difficult position. After hearing Yun Jianbai's words, Fan Yin also sighed. That's why we have to pay attention. Grandmaster Yun is right. Since things have already come to this, I think you should continue with the competition. Otherwise, if you lose this competition because of forfeiting, the losses will outweigh the gains. Hearing their words, Sun Xiao's heart turned cold. She knew very well that if she continued to cause trouble, it would be useless. Perhaps Han Xinyin was really hoping that she would cause trouble? According to Sun Xiao's guess, the equipment that the Tiangongmen use for the competition should be able to block a level 12 attack. Of course, this was only her guess. She didn't know exactly how many levels of attack it could block. However, it wouldn't be easy for her leather armor to block a level 12 attack. More importantly, the other party had added insult to injury by asking Gu Yunfei to fight. According to Sun Xiao's guess, with Gu Yunfei's skills and a level 12 weapon, he might be able to unleash a level 14 attack. If he unleashed a level 14 attack, would her leather armor really be able to withstand it? The most infuriating thing was that her Kikyamen didn't have any experts. Even if she wanted to give them a taste of their own medicine, there was nothing she could do. This competition had already exceeded Sun Xiao's expectations. It had reached a stage that she couldn't imagine. Thinking about Yun Jianbai and Fan Yan's words, Sun Xiao sighed in her heart. She sat down weakly and sighed. All right, let's continue with the competition. Yun Jianbai and the others also sighed in their hearts after hearing Sun Xiao's words. If both parties were to compete normally, Kikyaman's leather armor's super defense might really be able to compete with the Tiangongmen's equipment. However, now that the Tiangongmen had sent Gu Yunfei, this made the competition a little unfair. While the Tiangongmen's armor could withstand a level 12 attack, Kikyaman's leather armor could withstand a level 13 or even level 14 attack. This was simply too unfair. However, although everyone knew that it was unfair, they couldn't change this fact. Because both parties had a contract in hand, outsiders couldn't say anything about it. Seeing that Sun Xiao had agreed to continue the competition, Han Xinyin was overjoyed and couldn't help but laugh. After laughing, Han Xinyin slowly lowered his head and looked at the competition field. Suddenly, he cupped his fists and bowed to Gu Yunfei. Master, this competition concerns the reputation of our sect. Please don't hold back. Your disciple thanks you. Gu Yunfei, who had been silent all this while, only nodded slightly after hearing Han Xinyan's words. These people in front of him were all his juniors, so he didn't have anything good to say. If it weren't for his disciple's urgent request, he wouldn't have participated in this competition no matter what. With his status, if he wanted to participate in a competition, it would be a competition between the major sections. In fact, while the judges were arguing on the stage, Gu Yunfei had been observing Kikyaman's leather armor. Kikyaman's leather armor was indeed made from the skin of a wild bear. Gu Yunfei was absolutely sure of this. Based on his experience, he could tell that this leather armor had been soaked in a special liquid to increase the toughness of the wild bear's skin, thereby increasing the armor's defensive capabilities. In addition, the surface of the leather armor was faintly coated with a layer of skyworm silk. The purpose was naturally to make use of the skyworm silk's toughness to increase the armor's defensive capabilities against pickups. When he saw Kikyaman's design, Yunfei sneered inwardly. The skyworm silk was indeed very strong and could indeed increase the armor's defensive capabilities. However, such a thin layer of skyworm silk had no effect on spike-type weapons. It only increased the armor's defensive capabilities by a little. Actually, Sun Xiao had thought of this point as well as Gu Yunfei. Unfortunately, she didn't have that much skyworm silk, so she could only use a thin layer to block the entire leather armor. She didn't have enough skyworm silk to increase the density of the armor. When that disciple had gone to find Gu Yunfei hadn't wanted to come. However, he had heard from that disciple that the leather armor made by Kikyomin could actually withstand a level 11 attack. Chapter 368. It was precisely because Gyunfei had heard of this news that he had rushed here in high spirits. He wanted to see just what was so magical about this leather armor. As a master of equipment crafting, he naturally knew how much damage a leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear could withstand. Gu Yunfei was sure that a leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear would not exceed level 6, even if he were to craft it himself. However, the leather armor made by Kikyomin could actually withstand a level 11 attack. Gu Yunfei was in disbelief, and he wanted to see this amazing technique for himself. Unfortunately, he was disappointed. He had already seen through the crafting technique of this leather armor, and there was nothing special about it. But why could it withstand a level 11 attack? Since he couldn't figure it out, Gu Yunfei wanted to try it out himself to see why the defense of this leather armor was so strong. Since the founder was going to take the field personally, he naturally couldn't trouble the founder to retrieve the weapon himself. Following Han Qingyun's order, Han Yuchao hurriedly went forward to retrieve the level 12 weapon and handed it to Gu Yunfei. Gu Yunfei took the sword expressionlessly and slowly walked over to Kikyomin's leather armor. After examining it carefully and confirming that there was nothing special about it, he sneered and slowly raised the sword in his hand. Just as Gu Yunfei's sword was about to slash at the leather armor, a sharp-eyed person in the audience cried out in surprise. "Sword gleam, it really is a sword gleam." Following this person's cry, more and more people cried out in surprise. Sun Xiaoer was so shocked that she broke out in a cold sweat. Her gaze was fixed on the sword in Gu Yunfei's hand. She didn't even blink when a bead of sweat hit her eyes. In the blink of an eye, the sword in Gu Yunfei's hand emitted a blue sword gleam that was a foot long. It drew a semicircle in the air and struck Kikyomin's leather armor like lightning. Gu Yunfei's strike didn't produce a thunderous sound, nor did it have the power to topple mountains and overturn seas. However, no one doubted that this strike definitely contained unparalleled power. Seeing Gu Yunfei's strike silently land on the leather armor, Sun Xiaoer felt her throat go dry. She couldn't even let out a cry of surprise. Lung Yelyo was so scared that he covered his eyes with his hands, not daring to look at the fate of this leather armor. To be able to use inner strength to activate the long saber and release a foot-long blue saber glow. No one knew how strong one's inner strength was, and how terrifying the might of this saber was. When Gu Yunfei's saber struck Kikyomin's leather armor, he suddenly let out a cry of surprise. "Ah!" After exclaiming in surprise, Gu Yunfei quickly withdrew his saber and retreated. His face was filled with disbelief. Under such a tyrannical attack, this leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear was actually unharmed. Although Lung Yelyo had covered her eyes, she had been watching the results closely through the gaps between her fingers. When she saw that the leather armor was unharmed, she couldn't help but cry out in surprise. She then turned her head to look at Sun Xiaoer and shouted loudly, "Mom, it's okay." The leather armor didn't break. Just as Lung Yilu finished speaking, in the blink of an eye, the audience burst into thunderous applause. "Incredible! He actually withstood a level 12 attack. Is this really leather armor?" Hearing the applause and discussion from the audience, Sun Xiaoer's eyes widened and actually became a little moist. This leather armor actually withstood a level 12 attack, and it was made by Gu Yunfei, which was equivalent to a level 14 attack. How is this possible? Han Qingyun was so shocked that his mouth was wide open. He stared at Kikyomin's leather armor in disbelief. According to the rules, the Tianji sect had actually broken the rules. Both parties were testing the defensive power of their equipment, and they weren't allowed to use inner strength. They could only use sabers and swords. Even if you used more strength, no one would say anything. However, Gu Yunfei had actually released a saber glow. This wasn't very appropriate. More importantly, Gu Yunfei's saber strike was able to destroy the leather armor. That was one thing but the leather armor was able to block the saber light. This was unbelievable. After a long while, Han Qingyun's mouth slowly closed. He turned his head to look at Sun Xiaoer, and for a moment, he didn't know what to say. Nie Tianhao of the Sky Sword Sect was so shocked that cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He was really shocked by the defensive power of this leather armor. Nie Tianhao had seen Gu Yunfei's saber glow clearly. Nie Tianhao was sure that Gu Yunfei hadn't used his full strength. Even if Gu Yunfei hadn't used his full strength, the power of that saber glow was definitely not to be underestimated. With just a 1-foot-long saber glow, it could even split a giant rock in half. Nie Tianhao's martial arts were decent, but with his inner strength, he could only release a 1-foot-long saber glow. This meant that Gu Yunfei's saber glow was equivalent to Nie Tianhao's full strength. Such a powerful attack, but this leather armor still withstood it. At this moment, Nie Tianhao suddenly realized that if his opponent was wearing this leather armor, he wouldn't be able to deal with it. This was because even if he used his full strength, he wouldn't be able to break through the defense of this leather armor. Nie Tianhao had been practicing martial arts for more than 30 years. He had experienced more than 30 cold winters and scorching summers. After so many years of hard work, he finally realized that after so many years of hard work, he couldn't even break through the defense of a piece of leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear. What was the point of practicing martial arts like this? Looking at the leather armor on the shelf, Nie Tianhao suddenly had the urge to snatch it away. The audience cheered thunderously, but the judge's stand was silent. After a long while, Fan Yin finally spoke in a hoarse voice. "Sect Leader's son, I'm really impressed. A leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear can actually withstand such a powerful attack. I'm really impressed." Hearing Fan Yan's words, Sun Xiaoer only smiled faintly. This wasn't because she was confident, but because even she was so shocked that she couldn't speak. Based on Sun Xiaoer's estimation, Gu Yunfei's saber strike was about the power of a level 14 attack. This leather armor could actually withstand a level 14 attack. Sun Xiaoer didn't even think about this kind of defense. Although she knew that this was Zhang Meng's ancestral ultimate skill, she never thought that this ultimate skill would be so terrifying. It could make a piece of equipment almost invincible. Originally, she thought that this ancestral skill of Zhang Meng's would consume 3 years of her life. She felt that it wasn't worth it. But now, it seemed like it was worth it. Even if it consumed 5 years of her life, Sun Xiaoer felt that it was very worth it. This was because the target of Zhang Meng's ultimate skill this time was only an ordinary piece of equipment made from the skin of a wild bear. If Zhang Meng had used this ultimate skill on the Tiangongmen's equipment, no one would have been able to break through his defense. If he used this ultimate skill on his own armor during a battle, it would be very difficult. Chapter 369. If Zhang Meng used this ancestral skill on his equipment during a battle, then no one would be able to break through his defense. It would be extremely difficult for anyone to defeat him. Gu Yunfei tested Kikyaman's equipment first. Next, it was Kikyaman's turn to test the Tiangongmen's equipment. In the first few rounds of attacks, no one paid attention to the Tiangongmen's equipment. This was because everyone knew that equipment made of deep-sea frosty iron and adamantine would not be able to break through its defense under level 12. Now that the competition had reached level 12, it was time to determine the winner. Kikyaman's leather armor had withstood a level 12 attack. Now, it was time to test whether the Tiangongmen's armor could withstand a level 12 attack. The person in charge of testing the Tiangongmen's equipment was a slightly bulkier female disciple. This was mainly due to her great strength, which could increase her attack power. This was why she was chosen to test the equipment. The female Tiangongmen disciple took the sword from Gu Yunfei's hand and quickly walked to the front of the Tiangongmen's armor. At this point, the female Kikyaman disciple knew that her task was difficult. For this competition, the Tiangongmen had already invited their elders. Naturally, their goal was to increase their attack power. Looking at the equipment made of deep-sea frosty iron and adamantine. The female Kikyaman disciple suddenly shouted. She raised the sword in her hand and used all her strength to slash at the Tyngongman's equipment. Since the equipment was made of metal, the sword made a crisp sound when it hit the equipment. After the sound, the female Kikyaman disciple's hand was numb from the impact. She took the opportunity to withdraw her sword and retreat. Only then did she have time to check the effect of her attack. With one look, the female disciple was overjoyed. She hurriedly shouted, "It broke! It broke!" As the female disciple shouted, everyone was shocked. Their eyes widened as they looked at the armor. Even Han Qingyun was shocked by the sound. He hurriedly stood up and carefully looked at his armor. After looking at it, Han Qingyun was slightly relieved. He suddenly turned to look at the female Kikyaman disciple and shouted angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? How did it break? Hurry up and get out of here." After reprimanding the female disciple, Han Qingyun was also secretly shocked. Although his armor didn't break like the 7 skills sex female disciple had said, the slash just now had actually left a mark on his armor. Although this mark was very faint and could not be seen if one did not look carefully, Han Qingyun knew what it meant. A level 12 blade could already deal a certain amount of damage to this piece of equipment forged from deep-sea cold iron and fine gold. This meant that the equipment was about to reach its limit. Seeing the faint mark on the Heaven's Craftsman faction's equipment, Sun Xiaoer was overjoyed. She was a master of equipment crafting. Although she didn't understand the system of metal armor, when she saw this mark, she knew very well that this armor would soon reach its limit in the face of a level 12 attack. Previously, everyone had only been cheering and discussing. It was only now that they truly realized how strong Kikyaman's leather armor was. Even equipment made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine had a mark, but this armor made of wild bear's hide was completely unscathed. Although no one had said anything when Gu Yunfei attacked just now, everyone knew the power of his attack. Some people even began to whisper to each other. Could it be that this leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear had a higher defense than equipment made from deep-sea cold iron and fine gold? Although the Tyngongman's and Kikyaman's equipment could withstand a level 12 attack, with Gu Yunfei's attack, the leather armor would definitely have suffered a higher level of damage than level 12. When Gu Yunfei attacked just now, the sharp glint on the edge of his sword had been seen by everyone. As long as one was a martial artist, no one would not know what that glint represented. This meant that Gu Yunfei's attack had definitely exceeded level 12, and even level 13 would not be an exaggeration. Hearing the discussions in the audience, Gu Yunfei, who was in charge of the testing, could not help but change his expression. His originally calm and collected expression had turned somewhat ashen at this moment. He had personally attacked just now, so he naturally knew how strong his attack was. However, it had not been able to break through the defense of this leather armor. What the hell was going on? He looked at the leather armor and wanted to see what was going on. Unconsciously, he started to walk towards the leather armor. Lung Yoyo, who had been guarding beside the leather armor, saw this and hurriedly shouted, "Stop, don't go any further." Hearing Lung Yoyo's voice, Gu Yunfei came to his senses and looked at the leather armor not far away. He could not help but frown. If it was really a leather armor made of wild bear's hide, Gu Yunfei was sure that even if he used a level 1 sword, he would definitely be able to break through the defense of the leather armor. However, he had just used a level 12 weapon and 30% of his power. He did not expect that he would not be able to break through this leather armor made of wild bear's hide. Gu Yunfei was puzzled, but Han Qingyun, who was sitting at the head of the table, started to feel uneasy. What should he do next? Looking at his equipment made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine, Han Qingyun had the thought of retreating for the first time. Seeing that no one was talking, Fan Yin coughed lightly. When he saw that everyone was looking at him, he spoke loudly. "Congratulations, Sect Leader Han and Sect Leader Sunday. Your equipment has withstood a level 12 attack. Next, it's time to prepare for a level 13 attack." At this point, Fan Yin paused for a moment before he continued. Sect leaders, can we continue the competition now? After hearing Fan Yan's words, Han Qingyun hesitated for a moment. He did not answer Fan Yan's question, but stood up abruptly and walked towards Gu Yunfei. Seeing Han Qingyun hurriedly walk away, Sun Xiaoer did not need to listen to what Han Qingyun wanted to say to Gu Yunfei. Seeing Han Qingyun and Gu Yunfei whispering to each other, Sun Xiaoer was praying her heart. She prayed that young Master Zhang's ancestral skill would be stronger, so that he could block the next level 13 attack. Han Qingyun quickly walked in front of Gu Yunfei. He first cupped his fists and bowed before speaking in a low voice. Master, can you tell what this leather armor is made of? When Gu Yunfei heard this, he glanced at the 7 skills sect's leather armor and said in a low voice, I didn't find anything. For what I can see, it's just the skin of a wild bear. After some simple processing, it was made into this leather armor. The only difference is that there's a thin layer of wild silk on top. Chapter 370. At this point, Gu Yunfei paused for a moment before continuing. Other than the wild silk on it, there shouldn't be anything different. Hearing Gu Yunfei's answer, Han Qingyun subconsciously glanced at the leather armor. Everyone present was an expert in crafting equipment. Although Han Qingyun only took a glance, he could tell that the craftsmanship of this armor wasn't too deep. It was just the skin of a wild bear. After soaking it in medicine, it was cut into the shape of a leather armor and sewn together. Since it was such a simple craftsmanship, why was its defense so strong? Thinking of this, Han Qingyun asked again, Master, can't you see the reason at all? Gu Yunfei shook his head and frowned. No, I've looked at it more than 10 times, but I can't see the difference between this leather armor and other leather armor. Hearing Gu Yunfei's answer, Han Qingyun rubbed his hands anxiously. After a while, he asked anxiously, Master, with your skills, can't you break this leather armor? Hearing this, Gu Yunfei immediately sneered. I only used 30% of my skills just now, and that sword is only level 12. At this point, Gu Yunfei snorted coldly. If I use my full strength and a level 13 sword, I think that even if it's made of adamantine, I can still smash it into pieces. Hearing Gu Yunfei's confident words, Han Qingyun felt as if he had heard the sound of nature. He was instantly overjoyed and quickly cupped his fists. Master, we'll be depending on you later. If we can't break this leather armor this time, we'll be in trouble. Seeing this, Gu Yunfei reached out and patted Han Qingyun's shoulder. You're worried that your equipment won't be able to withstand a level 3 attack, right? Han Qingyun heard this and quickly nodded. That equipment made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine has already shown signs of being imprinted. I think it's reaching its limit. If we can't break this leather armor, we'll lose this competition. Hearing Han Qingyun's words, Gu Yunfei nodded and said proudly, Don't worry, I'll use my full strength this time. I'll definitely smash it into pieces. Hearing this, Han Qingyun thanked Gu Yunfei once again before returning to his seat and sitting down. When Fan Yan saw that Han Qingyun had returned, he hurriedly asked with a smile, Sect Master Han, can we begin the competition now? Hearing Fan Yan's question, Han Qingyun slowly turned his head to look at Sun Xiaoer. He sneered and said, If the competition continues, I wonder if Sect Leader Sun will be afraid? After saying this, Han Qingyun did not wait for Sun Xiaoer to reply. He waved his hand at Fan Yan and laughed. Brother Fan, let's start now. Hearing Han Qingyun's laughter, Sun Xiaoer felt even more uneasy. Although a mark had appeared on the Tiangolman's equipment, no one could guarantee that a level 13 attack would be able to break through its defense. His leather armor, on the other hand, was in danger. Sun Xiaoer was certain that after Han Qingyun and Gu Yunfei's secret discussion, Gu Yunfei would probably use his full strength this time. With Gu Yunfei wielding a level 13 weapon and using his full strength, there were not many things in this world that could stop him. Although Prince Zhang's ancestral skill was very powerful and could be considered a miracle, Gu Yunfei's martial arts were not something that ordinary people could compare to. Even in South County City, not many people were his match. Sun Xiao knew that the only thing she could do now was to keep praying. She prayed that Prince Zhang's skill would be able to block this attack. Following Fan Yan's order, Han Yuchao took the level 13 sword from the weapon rack and handed it to Gu Yunfei with both hands. At the same time, he said in a low voice, "Grand Advisor, you can't hold back this time." Hearing this, Gu Yunfei smiled and nodded. He took the sword from Han Yuchao's hand and slowly walked toward Kikiamin's leather armor. This time, Gu Yunfei stopped about 3 meters away from the leather armor. If the distance was too close, the power of the sword would not be able to fully explode. Therefore, he had to choose a suitable position. Looking at the leather armor on the rack, Gu Yunfei's eyes slowly narrowed, as if he wanted to find a flaw in the leather armor so that he could break through its defense with one strike. In just a moment, under the surging internal force, Gu Yunfei's coat began to make a rustling sound and slowly began to swell. Those who were closer to Gu Yunfei could already feel the true energy surging in front of them. The sound of the true energy breaking through the air could be heard. This process only took a moment. Gu Yunfei held the saber with both hands and slowly raised it above his head. At the same time, his left foot took a light step forward. When he stepped on the ground, it actually caused the ground to sink. As he slowly raised his hand, the surging true energy transformed into a blue sword light. At first, it was only about half a foot long. With the push of Gu Yunfei's internal force, it began to slowly grow. In the end, it actually reached 3 feet long. The blade light flickered in the air, and under Gu Yunfei's loud roar, everyone suddenly felt the ground tremble, and a strong wind rose up from all directions. Gu Yunfei urged his true qi and unexpectedly formed a small tornado around his body, which was constantly rotating around him. The dust and pebbles on the ground also slowly gathered into the tornado, causing the originally transparent tornado to become turbid. Standing outside, the only thing that could be seen clearly was the dazzling sword light. With the Yunfei's second roar, everyone only saw the blue sword light flash through the sky full of dust and disappear into the sky full of dust. In the next moment, everyone heard a muffled sound. In the next moment, a figure emerged from the dust and stood proudly outside the dust. As this figure jumped out of the tornado, the world seemed to be still. The tornado gradually subsided and the dust gradually fell. Everyone's eyes gradually became clear again. Gu Yunfei stood with his hands behind his back and looked up at the sky. Seeing Gu Yunfei's posture, Sun Xiao was suddenly shocked. She quickly turned her head to look in the direction of her leather armor. Suddenly, her mouth opened wide and she could no longer close it. The leather armor frame was still standing there, and the leather armor was still covered on the frame. The most important thing was that the leather armor was actually unharmed. Seeing this scene, Sun Xiao exclaimed in disbelief. Then, she turned her head to look at Gu Yunfei strangely. At this moment, Gu Yunfei also realized that something was wrong. In a situation where the sky was full of dust just now, he made a full blow. In fact, with his martial arts, he had already reached the level of restraining his true energy. Even if he made a full blow, it would definitely not be like this. He did this for a purpose. In other words, he deliberately made the sky full of dust. His purpose was naturally to not let everyone see what he was doing. Just now, Gu Yunfei did not use the blade to cut the leather armor. Instead, he used the sword light to cut the leather armor. Chapter 371. Under the activation of Gu Yunfei's internal energy, the blade light that was formed by Chengdu in his hand had reached an indestructible state. At this point, the strength of the sword light, combined with the effect of the blade, had surpassed the level of a level 15 attack. In Gu Yunfei's opinion, even if a level 15 attack couldn't break through the defense of the leather armor, it would still be enough to smash it into pieces. After Gu Yunfei used all his strength to attack, he retreated and looked up at the sky. Actually, he was just trying to adjust the surging true chi in his body and return it to his dantian. After adjusting his body, Gu Yunfei hurriedly looked forward. Now that the dust had settled, he could see the scenery in front of him clearly. At first, Gu Yunfei had an indifferent look on his face. Then, his eyes suddenly widened in disbelief. The Kikyaman leather armor was still hanging on the shelf in front of him, but there wasn't a single scratch on it. This time, no one cheered or applauded. There was only dead silence. Even the most lively and active Lung Yelyo opened his mouth wide and looked at the leather armor in disbelief. After a while, Fan Yan's hoarse voice sounded in everyone's ears. Cough, cough. Kikyaman's leather armor blocked a level 13 attack. Now, let's test the Taiyangalman's equipment. Han Qingyun, who had been staring blankly at the scene, suddenly woke up when he heard Fan Yan's words. He turned his head and looked at Sun Xiaoer, his face full of fear. You cheated? Sun Xiaoer only felt her throat go dry, but she tried hard to cough and said softly, Sect Master Han, tell me, how did I cheat? Hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Han Qingyun stood up suddenly and tried to grab Sun Xiaoer. No, you must be cheating. Otherwise, the leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear wouldn't be at this level. You cheated. Looking at Han Qingyun's crazy eyes, Sun Xiaoer was shocked. She couldn't care less and quickly ducked to avoid Han Qingyun's grab. She jumped to the side and shouted, Han Qingyun, what are you trying to do? Seeing that Han Qingyun was about to make a move, Fan Yan hurriedly reached out and pulled him back. He patted Han Qingyun's shoulder and said loudly, Secmaster Han, what's wrong? After being shouted at by Fan Yan, Han Qingyun came to his senses. He forced a smile and said slowly, I'm sorry. I lost my composure when I saw the armor's defense. Hearing Han Qingyun's answer, Fan Yan nodded understandingly. It would be strange if he wasn't surprised that the leather armor could block such a strong attack. Among the three judges, Nie Tianhao was the most excited. This armor's defense, this was beyond his imagination. Who was the person in front of him? Gu Yunfei. He was someone on the same level as his master. Even with Gu Yunfei attacking with all his strength, he was actually unable to break through the defense of this leather armor. What did this mean? If he wore this leather armor, wouldn't it mean that even Gu Yunfei couldn't do anything to him? At the thought of this possibility, Nie Tianhao's heart thumped wildly with excitement. Gu Yunfei was definitely someone he looked up to. If he had this armor, he wouldn't have to be afraid of Gu Yunfei's attack. Thinking of this, Dian subconsciously stood up and was about to walk towards the leather armor. At this moment, Yun Jianbai saw that Nie Tianhao's expression was not right. He hurriedly grabbed him and asked with concern, Hironya, what's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well? It was only when Yun Jianbai pulled him back that Nie Tianhao came to his senses. Cold sweat immediately appeared on his forehead. Kikyaman's armor had withstood a level 13 attack. Next, it was time to test the Taiyangalman's armor. At this moment, when the female disciple of Kikyaman received the level 13 sword, her hands were trembling with excitement. Looking at Sun Xiaoer's expectant eyes, the female disciple wished she could transform into a god of war and destroy the Taiyangalman's armor in one fell swoop to repay the sect leader's trust. The female disciple of Kikyaman walked slowly to the Taiyangalman's armor. After looking at it for a while, she suddenly roared. The sword in her hand drew a semicircle in the air and slashed at the Taiyangalman's armor with lightning speed. Ding! The long sword hit the metal armor, producing a crisp sound. After the sound, the female disciple of Kikyaman's hands were numb from the impact. However, she didn't put her sword away. Instead, she stared at the place where the sword had been. Seeing the state of the sword, the female disciple was overjoyed. She quickly put her sword away and looked at the place where she had been slashed. However, her expression gradually became dejected. The Taiyangalman's armor was made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine. It was no wonder that it had such a strong defense. Under the attack of a level 13 weapon, it only left a deep mark. The armor's defense wasn't completely broken. Seeing this, Han Qingyun was overjoyed. He stood up abruptly and shouted, "It blocked it! It really blocked a level 13 attack." Although Han Qingyun was indescribably happy, no one in the crowd paid attention to the armor's defense. Everyone's eyes were still fixed on the Kikyomen's armor. Equipment forged from deep-sea cold iron and fine gold had extremely high defense. This was within everyone's expectations. However, using the skin of a common wild beast like the wilderness bear to create equipment with such a strong defense was truly impressive. Wild bears were very common in Onwu country. It could be said that everyone present had hunted these wild bears before. Since they had all fought with wild bears, everyone knew what kind of weapon could cut through a wild bear's skin. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that in battle, as long as one used a level 3 weapon and their own brute strength, they would be able to cut through a wild bear's skin. If every wild bear's defense was as strong as this armor, it would be almost impossible for them to hunt wild bears. After a while, Fan Yin stood up and turned to look at Han Qingyun, smiling as he said, "All right, I'll give you a try. Master Han, since both sides' equipment has already blocked a level 13 attack, should we test the level 14 attack next?" Level 14 attack. After hearing Fan Yin's question, Han Qingyun subconsciously repeated this sentence. His brows gradually furrowed, and after a long while, he suddenly said in a hoarse voice, "Please wait for a moment. I still have something to do here. Let's all rest first. I'll be done soon." Hearing Han Qingyun's words, Fan Yin nodded in confusion and returned to his original seat. Han Qingyun sat in his seat for a while before slowly turning his head. Chapter 372. Han Qingyun hesitated for a moment, then stood up and walked towards Gu Yunfei again. Gu Yunfei's eyes were no longer as calm and confident as when he had first arrived. All that was left was a look of doubt. Seeing Han Qingyun walk over, Gu Yunfei's heart was suddenly filled with anger. After today's competition, regardless of whether he won or lost, the Tiangongmen's reputation would be ruined. Most importantly, he would become the laughingstock of the other elders. Not only that, his full-strength attack had not even been able to break a piece of leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear. He believed that it would not be long before the entire Onwu country knew about this news. He thought about how the streets and alleys would be talking about him in the future. He thought about how the reputation he had built would be destroyed in a day. Gu Yunfei could not hold it in any longer. When Han Qingyun arrived in front of him, he slapped him and said angrily in a low voice, "Look at the trouble you've caused. Could it be that you didn't investigate the other party's background before the competition? Let's see how you're going to clean up after today's mess." Han Qingyun covered his slapped face and said bitterly, "Master, before this, I've already investigated Kikyomen in detail. Kikyomen is just an ordinary small workshop. They don't have any outstanding achievements, nor have they ever made such superb equipment. Your disciple can swear that Kikyomen has never made such equipment, not even once. Not only that, your disciple has also sent people to investigate the equipment Kikyomen sells and tested the defensive capabilities of the equipment they sell. There's nothing out of the ordinary about them. Master, your disciple has already investigated thoroughly. Kikyomen definitely cannot withstand a single blow. There's nothing out of the ordinary about them." After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Gu Yunfei laughed coldly and pointed at Kikyomen's leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear. "Is this what you mean by unable to withstand a single blow?" At this point, Gu Yunfei snorted coldly and continued, "If this is what you mean by unable to withstand a single blow, then I'd like you to make more of this kind of equipment to raise our Tiangongmen's reputation." Han Qingyun sighed. "Master, don't you know your disciple's character? Would your disciple dare to do this if he wasn't 100% confident?" After hearing Han Qingyun's answer, Gu Yunfei couldn't help but give her another slap. "Is this how confident you are? Now, not only have you lost all your face, even I have lost all my face. This is really disgraceful." After being slapped by his master twice in a row, no matter how thick-skinned Han Qingyun was, he still couldn't hold it in any longer. Master, in order to win this competition for sure, I disregarded the objections of others in the faction and used the deep-sea cold iron, which was already scarce in the first place, to forge equipment. Why? Isn't it all for our Heaven's Craftsman faction? If this matter succeeds, it will bring us a lot of benefits. Master, when we first implemented this plan, you also agreed. If you didn't agree, would I dare to do it? Now that something has happened, if you start blaming me, I don't want to. Who would have thought that Kikyaman could make such powerful equipment? If I had known, I definitely wouldn't have made a move on Kikyaman. After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Gu Yunfei said angrily, "Are you blaming me?" When Han Qingyun heard this, he quickly cupped his fists and said, I wouldn't dare. At this point, Han Qingyun paused for a moment before continuing. Master, since things have already come to this, it's useless for you to blame me. I think we should find a way to salvage the situation as soon as possible. When Gu Yunfei heard this, he knew that Han Qingyun was right. Now is not the time to lose his temper. He could only sigh and say, what else can we do? Kikyaman's leather armor is too strange. Even if I used all my strength, I still couldn't break through its defense. At this point, Gu Yunfei turned to look at the Tiangongman's equipment made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine. He sighed again and said helplessly, I'm afraid that our equipment won't be able to withstand a level 14 attack. When Han Qingyun heard this, he quickly nodded and said, Master, when I first made this armor, I estimated that it should be able to withstand a level 12 to level 13 attack. Now, it's basically at its limit. If there are no accidents, its defense will most likely be broken by a level 14 attack. At this point, Han Qingyun sighed and said, I thought that it would be enough if it could withstand a level 12 attack. I didn't expect their equipment to be so strong. This is really beyond my expectations. After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Gu Yunfei nodded but didn't say anything. Gu Yunfei had nothing to say. He was Han Qingyun's master, so he was naturally better at making armor. Even if he hadn't seen this armor before, as long as he knew the materials used to make it, he could easily estimate how many level 14 attacks this armor could withstand. Now that this armor could withstand a level 13 attack, it could be considered to have exceeded its limit. To withstand a level 14 attack, in Gu Yunfei's opinion, it was impossible. When the Tiangongman tested the sword just now, he saw a mark. Although the mark wasn't very deep, it was enough to prove that a level 13 sword could cause damage to this armor. In terms of sharpness, a level 14 sword was naturally better than a level 13 sword. If a level 13 sword could cause damage to this armor, then a level 14 sword would definitely be able to cause even more damage. It might even break through the defense. This was all possible. Seeing that his master didn't say anything, Han Qingyun probed, Master, now is not the time to teach your disciple a lesson. Do you have any good ideas to salvage this situation? Hearing this, Gu Yunfei sighed. What else can I do? The opponent's leather armor's defensive power is extremely high. Even under my full power attack, it can actually withstand it. It's really quite difficult to deal with. After hearing Gu Yunfei's words, Han Qingyun hurriedly asked, Master, based on your test just now, if you were to attack with a level 14 sword, would you be able to break through the defense of this leather armor? After hearing Han Qingyun's question, Gu Yunfei was silent for a moment before he shook his head with a bitter smile. I don't know. The defense of this leather armor has already exceeded my expectations. Logically speaking, even if the Tiangongman's armor is made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine, it definitely wouldn't be able to withstand my attack just now. However, this ordinary leather armor made from the skin of a wild bear blocked my attack just now. Right now, I really don't know what the highest defense of Kikyaman's leather armor is. At this point, Gu Yunfei sighed before continuing. I don't know either. Chapter 373. Gu Yunfei continued. I don't know if a level 14 weapon can break through the defense of that leather armor. Han Qingyun sighed. Master, if we can't break through the opponent's defense in the next attack, and our equipment is likely to be destroyed by the opponent, we will lose. At this point, Han Qingyun cupped his fists and bowed to Gu Yunfei. He said softly, Master, we must win this match. I think we can only use that thing now. After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Gu Yunfei was shocked. He turned around abruptly and grabbed Han Qingyun's shoulder, rejecting him flatly. No, we definitely can't use that thing. Han Qingyun sighed. Master, if we don't use that thing, I'm afraid we will lose this match without a doubt. By then, the influence of the Heaven's Craftsman faction will be greatly reduced, and it will be impossible for us to expand our strength. Not only that, I'm afraid that the foundation of the Heaven's Craftsman faction will also be greatly weakened. After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Gu Yunfei's expression suddenly changed. Gu Yunfei knew what Han Qingyun wanted to say. Spirit water. In a cave behind the Tiangongmen's mountain, there was a cold ice spring. Not far from the cold ice spring, there was also a blazing spring. The water from the cold ice spring was bone-chilling, while the water from the blazing spring could melt gold and refine stone. These two types of spring water were actually useless when used alone. However, the magical part was that the steam from the two types of spring water would condense and drip down from the top of the rock wall above the two types of spring water. This kind of water droplet could only be dripped down 1 drop per year. It was quite rare. Up until now, the Tiangongmen had only collected 21 drops. Although these water droplets were rare, they were quite useful. As long as these water droplets were dripped onto equipment, it would immediately increase the toughness of the equipment. If the toughness of the armor increased, the defensive power would naturally increase as well. Every drop of spirit water could increase the toughness of the equipment by 10%, and the effects could be stacked. This was the idea that Han Qingyun had thought of. The collection of spirit water was too rare. Only 1 drop of spirit water could be collected every year. The Tiangongmen treated the spiritual water as a precious treasure and used it to guard the mountains. Was it necessary to use such a precious item to deal with a small Kikyaman? Gu Yunfei hesitated. Although deep-sea cold iron and gold essence were precious, they could still be bought with a high price. However, things like spirit water were not something that could be bought with money. No matter how much money one had, the amount of water dripping from the cliff would never increase. Thinking of the consequences of using the spirit water, Gu Yunfei couldn't help but frown. No one had ever dared to mention the use of spiritual water, since it meant that the Tiangongmen would have to use their last bit of strength. If anyone dared to suggest using the spiritual water, they would definitely be scolded by the Tiangongmen. Seeing Gu Yunfei frowning and deep in thought, Han Qingyun didn't feel good either. If he lost this competition and lost to an unknown Kikyaman, then he wouldn't have to think about having a foothold in the Tiangongmen anymore. Although he was deliberately the vice sect master, he wasn't the sect master after all. If everyone went to the sect master and said that he couldn't do it, then he might really lose his position. The only thing he could do now was to win this competition and salvage the situation. As long as he could win this competition, and under such circumstances, the Tiangongmen's reputation would definitely increase greatly in the future. Kikyaman's equipment was indeed very strong. It had already resisted a level 13 attack. If they defeated Kikyaman under such circumstances, then no one in the entire South County would dare to compete with the Tiangongmen. After all, there were simply too few sects that could make equipment that could resist a level 12 attack. Moreover, even if they could make equipment that could resist a level 12 attack, so what? Wouldn't they still be defeated by the Tiangongmen? Han Qingyun believed that as long as they won this competition, even if he used the spiritual water, the benefits of his competition would definitely be able to make up for the spiritual water used. The most important thing now was to win. As long as they won, everything would be fine. Thinking of this, Han Qingyun cupped his fists again and said, Master, we can't hesitate anymore. If we lose this competition, we're all finished. Hearing Han Qingyun's words, Gu Yunfei couldn't help but want to slap him again. However, after thinking about it, he held back. Gu Yunfei took a deep breath and said slowly, "Could it be that other than the spiritual water, there is no other way?" Han Qingyun smiled bitterly and shook his head. "If we can reforge the equipment, there are naturally better materials in the warehouse. However, there's no time now. We can only think of a way with this equipment. The only way is to increase the defense of this equipment as soon as possible. Only then can we win this competition." After hearing Han Qingyun's words, Gu Yunfei sighed. "If you had directly used better materials in this competition, you wouldn't have to be in such a difficult position." Han Qingyun smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Master, when I first investigated Kikyaman's background, I thought that using equipment made from deep-sea cold iron and adamantine would be enough to easily crush them. Who knew that it would end up like this?" Gu Yunfei turned his head and looked at Kikyaman's leather armor that was made from the skin of a wild bear. After being stunned for a while, he suddenly said in a hoarse voice, "All right then, we'll do as you say." After saying this, Gu Yunfei let out a long sigh. Seeing that Gu Yunfei had agreed, Han Qingyun was instantly overjoyed. He hurriedly cupped his fists and thanked him. "Thank you, master." Gu Yunfei didn't say anything. He only raised his hand and waved at Han Qingyun, indicating that he should leave. Han Qingyun thought for a while, then turned around and walked over to Han Yuchao. He lowered his voice and gave him a few instructions before returning to his seat. Seeing Han Yuchao quickly run out of the competition venue, Han Qingyun let out a long sigh of relief. He sat back in his chair and closed his eyes to rest. This action of Han Qingyun's was naturally taken in by everyone's eyes. However, Han Qingyun and Gu Yunfei spoke very softly. They could only see the two of them whispering to each other, but they didn't know what they were talking about. Seeing Han Qingyun close his eyes to rest, Sun Xiaoer was puzzled. Just now, his leather armor had withstood a level 13 attack, and the Tiangomen's equipment had a mark. Logically speaking, Han Qingyun should be nervous. But why was he only nervous at the beginning? And after talking to Gu Yunfei, his expression became calm. Could it be that Han Qingyun still had some tricks up his sleeve? Sun Xiaoer thought carefully. Han Qingyun might have some tricks up his sleeve, but after thinking for a long time, she still couldn't figure out what had restored Han Qingyun's confidence. The spirit water was the Tiangomen's secret. Naturally, outsiders wouldn't know about it. Chapter 374. This time, the wait was longer. Everyone waited for a full 15 minutes before Han Yuchao ran back with sweat all over his forehead. Han Yuchao came in front of Gu Yunfei, took out a porcelain bottle, and handed it over. "Grand Advisor, the spiritual water is here." Gu Yunfei took the porcelain bottle, opened the seal on the bottle, and looked inside. The Tiangomen had a total of 21 drops of spiritual water. Every 5 drops were sealed in a porcelain bottle. This time, Han Yuchao brought an entire bottle with a total of 5 drops of spiritual water. Looking at the spiritual water in the bottle, Gu Yunfei was a little reluctant to part with it. Every drop used was 1 drop less. If he wanted to increase it, he would need a year to obtain 1 drop. Now, in order to deal with Kikyaman's leather armor, he had to use 5 drops of spiritual water. After looking at it for a long time, Gu Yunfei slowly walked to the Tiangomen's armor made of deep-sea cold iron and adamantine. He sighed, then slowly poured the spiritual water in his hand onto the armor. Sun Xiaoer looked at Gu Yunfei's actions with some confusion. She did not understand why he poured water onto the armor. The most important thing was that there were only a few drops of water in the bottle. Looking at the few drops of water flowing on the armor, they gradually merged into the armor. Seeing this, although Sun Xiaoer did not know what it was, she could vaguely guess what it was. The medicinal water that Gu Yunfei poured on the armor should be the kind of medicinal water used to make leather armor. Although she knew that the water was medicinal water, Sun Xiaoer was still very confused. Although the medicinal water had a certain effect, the effect was definitely not very strong. Just as Sun Xiaoer was puzzled, the spiritual water had completely merged into the armor. The next moment, The armor flashed with a faint white light, then disappeared. Seeing this scene, Sun Xiaoer could no longer hold it in. She turned to look at Han Qingyun and asked curiously, "What are you doing? What are you trying to do?" Hearing Sun Xiaoer's question, Han Qingyun shook his head, not knowing whether to agree or disagree. Nothing. Seeing that she could not get anything out of Han Qingyun, Sun Xiaoer quickly turned her head and looked at the armor again. The armor was still shining with a golden light, as if nothing had changed. However, Sun Xiaoer knew that those few drops of medicine must have had some effect. Otherwise, Han Qingyun would not be so calm. Sun Xiaoer didn't know what potion Gu Yunzhang had poured on the equipment, but some of the judges knew. As the third disciple of the sword-crafting sect, Yun Jianbai naturally knew many secrets. When Han Yuchao handed Si Ping to Gu Yunfei, he had already vaguely guessed what was in the porcelain bottle. The gate spirit water of the Tiangongmen. This was something that Yun Jianbai's master had mentioned to him by chance. Yun Jianbai's master, Guan Jiansheng, happened to find a good sword when he was forging. He told Yun Jianbai that if he dripped a drop of the Tiangongmen's spirit water on it, the quality of the sword would immediately rise by 1 level. Hearing his master say that there was something that could improve the quality of the sword, Yun Jianbai hurriedly asked. Only then did Guan Jiansheng tell Yun Jianbai about the spirit water. In the end, Guan Jiansheng sighed and said, "Spirit water is a rare treasure in the world. It can instantly raise the quality of equipment by 1 level." From then on, Yun Jianbai knew about this treasure called spirit water. When Gu Yunfei looked at the item in the porcelain bottle with a pious look, Yun Jianbai was even more certain that the item in the bottle was spirit water. Understanding this point, Yun Jianbai couldn't help but take in a breath of cold air. He didn't expect that in order to fight with Kikyaman, Han Qingyun not only used the limited amount of deep-sea cold iron and gold essence, but also invited Gu Yunfei. In the end, he even took out the Tiangongmen's gate spirit water. Yun Jianbai turned to look at Han Qingyun, his heart somewhat shocked. At this moment, he completely understood that Han Qingyun could only win and not lose. No matter what price he had to pay, Han Qingyun would not allow failure. Yun Jianbai looked at Gu Yunfei pouring the spirit water from the porcelain bottle onto the equipment. Looking at the water flow just now, it should be about 4 or 5 drops. Yun Jianbai heard from his master that each drop of spirit water could increase the hardness of the equipment by 10%, which was also 10% of the defensive power. How much would 4 or 5 drops of spirit water increase the defensive power? Yun Jianbai silently calculated in his heart. Just now, the Tiangongmen's equipment had withstood a level 12 attack. If the spirit water's effect was added, it might be able to withstand a level 17 or 18 attack. Thinking of this, Yun Jianbai's forehead broke out in cold sweat. To be able to withstand a level 17 or 18 attack, how heaven-defying was that? Originally, he thought that Kikyaman's leather armor was already heaven-defying enough to withstand a level 13 or 14 attack. Now, the Tiangongmen's equipment had far surpassed Kikyaman's leather armor. Thinking about how the Tiangongmen's equipment had increased their defensive power by so much, Lin Jianbai sighed in his heart. He turned his head and looked at Sun Xiaoer sympathetically. Kikyaman's equipment had already opened his eyes today. He did not expect that it could increase the defensive power by so much. In the end, he did not expect that it would lose to the Tiangongmen's treasure, the spirit water. What a pity! What a pity! What a pity for that high-quality leather armor. As the deputy leader of the Tiangongmen, Han Qingyun naturally knew how much spirit water the porcelain bottle in Gu Yunfei's hand could contain. 5 drops. Seeing Gu Yunfei pour the entire bottle of spirit water on the equipment, Han Qingyun's heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally relaxed completely. No one knew better than him how much the defensive power of the equipment would increase with these 5 drops of spirit water. Han Qingyun nodded his head in satisfaction as he looked at the white light that flashed on the equipment made of deep-sea frosty iron and adamantine. The white light that flashed on the equipment meant that the spirit water had completely merged with the equipment, and the defensive power of the equipment had increased correspondingly. Han Qingyun turned his head to look at Sun Xiaoer and said with a smile, "Leader Sun, you really surprised me today. A piece of wild bear skin can actually be used to make leather armor with such high defensive power. It's really unexpected." Hearing Han Qingyun's relaxed words and seeing the calm smile on his face, Sun Xiaoer's heart suddenly hung in the air. She thought about the medicine that Gu Yunfei had poured on the equipment and the white light that had flashed on the equipment. Sun Xiaoer suddenly realized that the medicine that had been poured on the armor was definitely not an ordinary medicine. It must be very useful. Thinking of this, Sun Xiaoer could not be bothered to answer Han Qingyun's question. She hurriedly asked, "Leader Han, what did Senior Gu pour on the equipment? Is it a medicine that can increase the defensive power?" Hearing Sun Xiaoer's question, Han Qingyun nodded calmly. "That's right. It's a potion that can increase one's defense." Sect Leader Sun has good eyesight indeed. With just one look, you've understood the use of this item. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.